Chapter 198. In the darkness, the orcs rushed forward. The barbarian warriors who had been waiting for a long time waved their giant axes and charged forward. Raise your morale. Group petrifying skin. Group haste. Group enchanted weapon. Owl's sight. Rays of magic light rose from the North Town City's army. With the buff from the spells, the army's strength was doubled. In addition, the Owl's insight was a weakened version of weakness insight, so the North Town City's army's lethality increased once again. Their defense, speed, and strength were all strengthened. Even their weapons were strengthened. The battle was intense from the start. The orc warriors who were surrounded had no choice but to fight to the death. Roar! The leader of the orc warriors was one of the few elites in iron armor. After a roar to the sky, he rushed towards Su Luan while brandishing his heavy axe. Su Luan didn't care about him at all. After all, anyone under the legendary level was nothing more than an ant. With a sweep of the violet dragon halberd, he was sent flying. Blood poured out of his mouth, mixed with chunks of his internal organs. His body was twisted into a strange position, and before he even landed on the ground, he was already dead. Orcs could be said to be the strongest of the middle-sized humanoid races. Trolls and ogres belonged to the giant race. In this world, intelligent life still abided by the law that the bigger the body, the stronger the strength. Barbarians were already the largest humanoid race, but in front of the orcs, they were still nothing. But these seemingly weak beastmen barbarians easily overturned the beastmen warriors. On a large-scale battlefield, the clash of strength was common. The orcs were the tyrants of the wilderness. They weren't weak. They didn't lack strength or bravery. They were born with the ability to survive with violence. The most common orc warrior could easily take down 3 to 5 fully armed human soldiers with their bare hands. They could even take on the charge of a warhorse with no problem. Back then, the humans were able to defeat the orcs not only because of their strategy, but also because of the help of the elves. Unfortunately, they had bitten off more than they could chew. The soldiers of Northern Citadel weren't weak. Moreover, their strength, equipment, techniques, logistics, and willpower were superior in every aspect. Moreover, they had the support of the adepts as well. This slight advantage accumulated into an insurmountable gap. Moreover, half of the orcs were still crossing the river. The fact that they didn't collapse while crossing the river was already a testament to their bravery. The current battle had turned into a fueling tactic. Perhaps there were miraculous spells in this world that could turn the situation around, but it obviously wouldn't be these orcs. Su Luan led Boulder, Johnson, and a team of barbarian great axe berserkers to launch a charge. These barbarians went berserk and turned into killing machines. Whirlwind Slash didn't stop for even a moment. Army Spirit plus Haste plus Enchanted Weapons plus Berserk plus Whirlwind Slash plus Owl Sight, these barbarians turned into windmills. Their killing efficiency was so high that it left people speechless. Everywhere they passed, corpses were strewn everywhere. In fact, the windmill of these barbarians was only a weaker version. The real windmill could only be used by legendary warriors. It required legendary endurance, legendary berserk, whirlwind slash, aura slash, weakness detection, advanced battle reflex, and legendary strength. Then, a mage would buff him with advanced haste, advanced enchanted weapons, advanced enemy prediction, advanced fox's grace, and other support skills. Once such a person appeared on the battlefield, he could turn the entire battlefield into a meat mill. There was an ultimate version of the windmill skill. If one were to ask which class had the highest attack power among all the physical classes, the answer would undoubtedly be the Sword Saint. The Sword Saint class was very special. They gave up all their armor and pursued the highest attack power. This made them the class with the lowest defense among all the physical classes, but at the same time, it gave them an attack power that other physical classes couldn't reach. Only the Sword Saint could make the strongest attack of the physical classes. With a series of skills such as Blade Storm, Aura Slash, Weakness Detection, Cleave, Whirlwind Slash, Advanced Haste, and Enemy Prediction, the Sword Saint could burst out a powerful force in an instant. It was said that in the era of the legendary Arcane Empire, those great arcanists drove the floating city and the sword saint to kill the gods, but this kind of thing had not been confirmed until now. Sulen casually pulled out a javelin, leaned back, and threw it toward the orc crowd in front of him. At such a close distance, the orc warrior didn't have any time to react. The javelin, which was more powerful than the arrows shot from the ballista, instantly disappeared into the crowd of orcs. The javelin penetrated the orcs in a straight line, and blood splattered everywhere. All the orcs in the path of the javelin were penetrated by the javelin, and a big bloody hole appeared on their bodies. Screams of pain could be heard endlessly. Charge! The army of the northern battlefront city began to advance. Under the leadership of Sulen, the human army advanced steadily. The orcs also launched a counterattack, not to be outdone. Both sides were trying their best to expand their lines of defense and kill each other with all their might. The orcs surged forward like a tide, and the army of the northern battlefront city was like an indestructible reef in the sea. The tide splashed a lot of waves, and then it suddenly shattered. The orc warriors were surprised to find that the humans, who could only hide behind the solid city walls in their eyes, were actually so powerful. In this kind of close combat, the orcs were the ones who suffered heavy casualties. If that was all, then the orcs could still hold on for a while. However, the arrows that came from the back of the humans were like a storm. In a short period of time, the longbowmen had already shot out 30 arrows. In this small area of the river bank, more than 20,000 arrows had completely covered the entire area. With every step Sulen took, he left behind countless broken limbs. The scarlet blood turned the river bank into a muddy pool. Facing the soldiers of the northern battlefront city, the orcs were at a disadvantage. However, in front of Sulen, every orc was a match for him. The orcs on the river bank found it harder and harder to hold on. The orcs on the river behind them sped up, trying to support them. The night wind whistled. Blood and slaughter. A thick smell of blood spread across the battlefield along with the wind. The battle had reached its climax. Soldiers from both sides were dying every second. Neither the orcs nor the northern battlefront city soldiers showed any signs of backing down. When enemies met on a narrow path, the courageous would win. In just a few minutes, the area where the two armies were fighting was covered with corpses. Dark red blood flowed into a small stream, flowing along the river bank into the river. The Whitewater River was dyed red. The first row of elite longbowmen suffered heavy casualties. The second row of elite longbowmen took over. The northern battlefront city's longbowman formation was still in good condition. If the second row of longbowmen suffered heavy casualties, the third row of longbowmen would take over. The archers at the back began to recover their strength. Shooting 30 arrows in a short time created a rain of arrows that blotted out the sky. It also caused the archers to be temporarily exhausted. This battle could be said to be the most difficult battle the orcs had ever fought. In the past, when they fought with other tribes, those tribes didn't have much leather armor. They also didn't know how to coordinate with each other. Under the assault of the orcs, their formations could be easily torn apart in a few charges. Then, they relied on their strong physique and weapons to slaughter the tribes. Even the centaurs, who had been fighting with them for years, were defeated when they got close to them. However, this group of humans was different from all the enemies they had faced before. They had sturdy armor, shields, and sharp weapons. What made them even more uncomfortable was that every time they attacked, they would feel like they were being besieged by several humans. Under the leadership of Sulen, the barbarian guards were invincible. The orcs suffered heavy casualties. After speeding up the boat, the orcs finally reached the shore. These orcs didn't wait for the wooden raft to reach the shore. Instead, they directly came over to help. However, their arrival didn't help the orcs turn the situation around. Seeing all the orcs rushing to the shore, Sulen revealed a smile. He was worried that the battle here was too fierce and scared the orcs away. In the end, he wasn't disappointed. The orcs sped up and rushed to the shore. "Since you're all here, then stay here." Sulen smiled. He didn't let Christina and Hathaway do anything. He wanted to trap all the orcs here and then make the final decision. At the same time, he didn't want to give the orc army on the other side time to react. He wanted to kill all the orcs that crossed the river to ambush the orcs. Fireball. Chain lightning. Exploding flame. Chain fireball. Pain whip. Ice storm. Hathaway, Karina, and Chrissy were on a small hill behind Northgard City. They had prepared a long time ago and cast all the spells they were going to cast. The narrow shore was filled with all kinds of elemental powers. Frost, lightning, and fire wreaked havoc in this area. The orcs that had just rushed to the shore and hadn't made contact with the northern city soldiers yet were drowned by the elemental powers. The flames melted the steel and ignited the beastmen's bodies. Lightning danced back and forth in the crowd of beastmen. All of the beastmen's bodies were charred black by the electricity. Pieces of ice blades suddenly appeared and spun rapidly. The sharp ice blades directly cut the beastmen's bodies into countless terrifying wounds. As soon as blood flowed out, it was frozen into ice. It wasn't just physical damage. These orcs felt like their brains were being stirred with a red-hot iron. Blood flowed out of their nostrils like water pipes. Even their eyes and ears were bleeding. In just a few breaths, the hundreds of orcs that had rushed to the shore and the hundreds of orcs before them were all wiped out. Chapter 199. The battlefield was silent. The soldiers of North City were also shocked by the series of explosions. The power of the spellcasters was not just for show. It was only 2 4th-level spellcasters and a 3rd-level spellcaster, but they were able to kill 1,000 orcs in a short period of time. Su Len had only seen this kind of scene in modern battlefields in the movies from his previous life. The smell of burnt flesh filled the air, accompanied by the thick smell of blood. It was nauseating. Other than the orcs, a few barbarians who rushed too quickly were also affected. Some of them were burnt black by the lightning, while others were burned quite badly by the flames. However, these barbarians were wearing dragon leather armor and had intermediate toughness. They had high resistance, so their injuries were not too serious. After the battle, Su Len arranged for people to help the injured soldiers and clean up the battlefield. He began to treat the seriously injured soldiers. The green light of the physical healing spell kept rising, and the green life energy merged with these seriously injured soldiers. Soon, these people recovered from their serious injuries to light injuries. Just as the soldiers of North City were cleaning up the battlefield, the orcs finally gathered their troops and moved towards the river. However, they were too late. From the beginning of the battle to the end, it lasted less than half an hour. With the orcs' ability to organize their troops in such a short period of time, it could be said that they were well trained. Of course, Su Luen was very clear about the organizational ability of the army in this world. Even the elite troops of the Kingdom of Florence could not assemble in 20 minutes. He successfully used this time difference to take down the elite troops that the orcs used for the sneak attack. After the orc army saw that the battle was over, they roared angrily and left with their troops. This surprised Su Len. He did not angrily order the soldiers to continue to cross the river. Su Len was ready to earn some experience, but he did not expect the orc commander to hold back. However, since they left, Su Len was not in a hurry to fight with them. In order to end the battle in a short period of time, the soldiers of North City had expended a lot of energy. Those longbowmen had basically used up all their strength in a short period of time. Now, they had only recovered 30% to 40% of their strength. The battlefield was quickly cleaned up. Su Len left the scouts behind to continue monitoring the situation, and then led the army back to the camp to rest. In this battle, more than 50 spearmen died, and 200 to 300 were injured. After Su Len used physical healing, there was not much of a problem. There were no casualties among the archers, but a few of the barbarians were heavily injured. There were also hundreds of mercenaries and merchant guards who had lost their lives. Because these people had not undergone any training, they were not suitable to fight with the spearmen. So, they were grouped together with the barbarians. As a result, when the barbarians charged forward, these people also rushed forward. Most of them hadn't reached the night level yet, and they didn't know how to cooperate with each other. They had no advantage against the orcs. Although they had killed a lot of orcs, they had also suffered heavy casualties. After returning to the camp, Sulen waited for all the soldiers, including the wounded ones, to settle down before returning to his tent. Summoning the system interface, Sulen began to check the rewards of this battle. You've won a huge victory. Congratulations, host. You've defeated an elite orc army. You've received 28,300 experience points. Your experience bar has been filled. Your level has been increased. You've received a gold treasure chest. You've received the item star Iron X3. Your level has been increased. Current level is LV23. You've received 2 free attribute points and 2 skill points. Congratulations, host. You've received a victory. You've received a gold treasure chest. After adding the 2 free attribute points to strength, Sullen's strength had reached a shocking 49 points. He then opened the storage space and opened the gold treasure chest. 2 consecutive flashes of light, and Sulen heard the system notification sound in his ears. Congratulations, host. You've received a bottle of Big Dipper Heavenly Liquid. Congratulations, host. You've received the innate skill, Regeneration. Sulen felt a strange energy enter his body, and his body felt relaxed. The innate skill, Regeneration, had merged with his body. Sulen took out the Big Dipper Heavenly Serum and drank it directly. The light blue liquid sparkling with starlight quickly merged with his body, and a numb feeling came from his body. After a while, a warm feeling came from his body. Congratulations, host. You've consumed the Big Dipper Heavenly Serum. Your physique has increased by 3 points. After moving his body, Sulen began to check his new innate skill. Regeneration. After going through cruel training, your bloodline has awakened a mysterious ability. Your recovery speed has increased. Your recovery speed +3. There were many people who had the innate skill, Regeneration. For example, the lizard men were born with intermediate regeneration. After their arms or tails were cut off, they would regrow them after a period of time. However, the newly regrown limbs needed to be trained before they could reach the standard of the Great Path. Of course, even if the innate skill, Regeneration, was powerful, not all injuries could be healed. At the very least, if one's head was cut off, one would still die. Sullen's innate skill, Regeneration, was limited on the battlefield. The recovery speed was too slow. Of course, it did not mean that this skill was useless. This level of regeneration could quickly heal some small wounds on the body. After the skill, Regeneration, was upgraded to an advanced level, the recovery speed would be faster. If the Regeneration skill was upgraded, he would obtain the Divine Transcendence skill. Divine Transcendence was a legendary skill, and many monks wanted to obtain it. The effect of this skill was very simple. His body would always be at its peak state. At the same time, there were other benefits. However, Sulen did not have complete information about Divine Transcendence, and he could not find any specific information. In addition to the innate skill, Sulen added 2 attribute points to Physical Healing, and the skill was upgraded to Living Healing. The healing effect of Living Healing was strengthened again. One use could restore a heavily injured person to their normal state. The healing effect of Living Healing was indeed very strong, and this skill could continue to be upgraded. However, if he wanted to continue upgrading, he would need to fuse some other skills. For example, the 7-star lamp would become Resurrection after fusing. Of course, the conditions for this resurrection were very harsh. The corpse had to be more than 90% intact, and the time of death could not be more than 2 days. There were other requirements, but they were not too important. Sulen casually opened the system interface and looked at his attributes. Name, Sullen race, human level, LV23, 8854600000, divinity, 210, demigod, strength, 49 agility, 32 spirit, 27 + 3, tungsten steel, vitality, 36 charm, 21 command, 81 characteristics, innate skill valiant, thunderbolt, Pegasus, legendary sturdy, legendary tenacity, calm, elemental affinity, advanced lightning affinity, iron will, body hardening, beast face armor, advanced battle reflex, roll dodge, iron bones, regeneration, mana regeneration, tungsten steel, skills, mystic ice slash, living healing, life healing, crimson flame, forbidden magic, mechanical control, stone to mud, boost morale, beginner, earth spring, army rouse ultimate skills, whirling cherry, mastery, heroic, master, torrential storm, advanced, chaotic dance, beginner, silver dragon inversed scale spear, beginner, weapon proficiency, sword weapon 170, gun weapon 255, bow 122, throwing 108, horsemanship 160, thunder domain, beginner. You have begun to control the power of lightning. When you use lightning power again, it will be even more powerful. You are immune to normal lightning damage. The cost of all lightning skills will be reduced by 30%, and the power of all lightning skills will be increased by 30%. Lightning absorption, beginner. You can absorb any form of lightning attack, as well as electricity from the outside world. The absorbed lightning can strengthen your next attack, or be converted into your energy. Note, you cannot exceed the absorption limit. Thunder domain, after consuming a large amount of energy, you can create a world of lightning within 15 meters of yourself. All people or monsters that enter this area will be damaged by lightning. In this domain, your skills and strength will be increased by 100%. War roar, divine ability, beginner. You have successfully fused with the divinity of the ancestor soul troll. When you focus your mind and channel the energy to your throat, you can release an unimaginable sound wave attack. Everyone around you will be affected by the sound wave attack. They must pass the Constitution test with a difficulty of 10 plus divinity. At the same time, everyone will be affected by the sound wave attack, 10 plus divinity. If you fail to pass the test, you will be stunned. The effect will decrease as the distance increases. After dealing with everything, Su Len yawned and prepared to rest for a while. A high-intensity battle would make people nervous. The best way was to relax. Sleeping was the best way to relax. Chapter 200. The orcs had suffered a great loss in the battle last night, but they still did not give up on the idea of defeating Northgard Castle. Early the next morning, the orcs and their servants began to chop wood to make rafts on the north bank of the Whitewater River. It was obvious that they were planning to continue crossing the river. For the next few days, the two sides faced each other across the Whitewater River. The orcs made many rafts. Finally, on this morning, the orcs began their attack. To Su Luan's surprise, these beastmen actually split up into several teams and crossed the river from different areas. There were only 2,000 beastmen in northern town city. If they split up like the beastmen army, they would all be defeated by the beastmen except for the team led by Su Luan. In other words, the orcs knew that Northgard Castle had fewer people, so they used this method to cross the river. Even after the orcs split up, each group was still outnumbered by Northgard Castle. Even if Su Len wanted to defeat one group, it would take some time. The orcs would use this time to finish crossing the river and regroup. It didn't matter which team the Northgard fort attacked. The orcs had crossed the river in the end. Although Su Len was not happy, he did not attack the orcs again. Instead, he began to get into formation and prepare for the final battle. He planned to have a final battle and defeat the orcs with his true strength. When he saw the orcs crossing the river, Su Len called 2 scouts and told them to contact the centaurs. It was time to decide the outcome of this battle. Because they had enough rafts, the orcs only needed less than half an hour to cross the Whitewater River. The other scouts also sent the news. Su Len threw away the ice scale fruit that only had the core left. He then asked Aten, "What's the situation? Where are the centaurs?" "They have already moved to the back of the orcs from the flank. They will reach their destination in an hour." Su Len nodded. "Is there any movement from the orcs?" Aten said with a serious expression, "Not much movement. They are gathering." "Oh right, they didn't bring any supplies. They only brought some dry rations." "Didn't bring any supplies?" He only brought dry rations? It seemed like these beast men wanted to devour northern Battlefront City in one go. Sullen's lips curled into a mocking smile. He then turned around and ordered, "Inform everyone to prepare for battle." The wind howled. The flag fluttered in the wind. The muffled sound of the horn echoed across the land. Amidst the low and deep sound of the horn, a huge army slowly approached. The army was a black mass that stretched as far as the eye could see. There were more than 10,000 people in the army, and there were at least 15,000 people in the army of orcs and servants. In the middle of the army, a flag was raised high and fluttering in the wind. The flag looked very simple, with some beast-man characters drawn on it. There were also a few strange-looking skeletons on the flagpole. Those were probably the heads of the other tribe leaders that the beast-men had defeated. The beast-men in front of them could be said to be at their strongest. After defeating their nemesis, the centaurs, the beast-men tribe was invincible in the wilderness. However, northern Battlefront City occupied the best place in the wilderness. Of course, the beast-men didn't want to accept such a situation. Of course, they didn't know that the northern Battlefront City's environment had become better because of the harvest altar. However, Sulen didn't think they would care even if they knew. In the northern wilderness, this was the only place that wasn't covered in snow during winter. The beast men had lived in the wilderness for hundreds of years, and so did the Burning Blade clan. They knew what this meant. This piece of land could prevent them from dying in the winter. They didn't have to worry about the old and weak in the tribe surviving the winter. It also meant a lot of food. Therefore, once they knew that northern Battlefront City was in Sullen's hands, the conflict between them couldn't be resolved. One side had to be defeated completely. The two armies were about 2 miles apart. Neither side spoke. The entire battlefield suddenly became silent. A strong murderous aura was brewing on the battlefield. Roar! Warriors of the Burning Blade clan! We have defeated the trolls, the ogres, and the centaurs. I am proud of you. Now, we will defeat these humans in front of us. They have occupied the best land in the wilderness. As long as we occupy it, we will never starve again. The old and weak in the tribe will never freeze to death in the winter. This land was given to us by the great father god Gawushan. Now, we will take it back. Take it back. Kill all the humans. Dong dong dong. The war drums made of Kodo beast skin sounded loudly. The beastmen army and their servants began to slowly advance. Sulen chose a plain as the battlefield. On the left was the Whitewater River, and on the right was a swamp with lush water plants. The swamp was filled with reeds that were as tall as a man. It could easily hide thousands of people. However, Sulen didn't leave anything behind. Although the reeds were easy to hide, the people hiding inside would be burned alive if they were set on fire. The width of the battlefield limited the number of beastmen that could participate in the battle. A tall beastman in iron armor appeared on a high platform. Behind him was the flag of the beastmen army. Beside him were a few old beastman shamans. Ancient beastman language came from their mouths. Their voice was low but penetrating. The entire battlefield could hear them clearly. Battle song, frenzy. A strange energy swept across the battlefield. The beastmen's eyes turned red, and their breathing became heavier. As the beastman army approached, Suluan could clearly see the first row of beastman warriors. They were wearing simple leather armor, and some of them didn't even have leather armor. They only wore a breastplate to cover their vital parts. The weapons in their hands were also a variety of weapons. There were crude maces, spiked hammers, rusty axes, and spears. It was clear that these beastmen weren't elites. There were also a large number of gnolls, bugbears, and earth goblins among them. It was clear that this army was the beastmen army's cannon fodder. They wanted to use the cannon fodder to deplete the strength and morale of the beastmen army. On the strategic map, Sulen could clearly see that behind these beastmen was the true main force of the beastmen army. At the same time, a large number of yellow dots were quickly circling around the edge of the map. Those dots were the centaurs. Over 60 ballistae were already loaded. When the beastmen cannon fodder were 500 meters away, they fired. Bang! 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 The sound of bowstrings rang out unceasingly. 62 to 3-meter-long crossbow bolts were shot out in an instant. The crossbow bolts carried great destructive power as they rushed towards the orc army. Everywhere they passed, blood mist rose. Every crossbow bolt pierced through at least 5 orcs' bodies. The barbarians didn't look at the results. With the help of a few auxiliary soldiers, they quickly reloaded the ballistae and fired again. The ballistae originally needed at least 4 adults to draw the bowstrings. Now, only 1 barbarian could do it. The 60 ballistae fired continuously. A large number of beastmen, bugbears, and gnolls were pierced through like candied haws. They died painfully. However, death didn't scare these people. Instead, it made them even angrier. The ground was shaking. Despite the heavy casualties, the beastmen army was still pushing forward. Their intimidating aura was stifling even from a few hundred meters away. Sulen waved his hand. Hathaway and Karina stepped forward and started casting spells. Group Haste. Group Petrifying Skin. Group Enchanted Weapon. Beams of spells buffed the warriors of the northern citadel, making them even stronger. Sulen raised his purple dragon halberd. His figure looked extremely tall under the sunlight. As the lord of the northern citadel, he had led the army to victory again and again. In the hearts of the soldiers, he was the god of war. Victory! Sulen roared. The entire army of the northern citadel was like an awakened lion. Victory! 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 The warriors of the northern citadel raised their spears and shields and roared in unison. The dull horn sounded, and a wave of high morale spread from their bodies. Sulen could raise the morale of his troops without doing anything after winning so many glorious victories. This time, he even used a morale boost. Although it was only a basic morale boost, it was even more effective than an advanced morale boost. The beastmen army finally reached 200 meters away from the northern citadel. With a furious roar, a large number of beastmen charged at the northern citadel's defense line. Raise your shields. Raise your spears. Longbowmen. Fire at once. A wall of shields as tall as a man was instantly erected, followed by long spears glowing with a cold light. The northern citadel army instantly turned into a giant porcupine. The archers behind the spears drew their bows and nocked their arrows. A black shadow formed by countless arrows soared into the air and landed on the beastmen army. A large number of beastmen were hit by the arrows. 200 meters wasn't a long distance. It only took a dozen seconds for the beastmen army to reach the northern citadel army, braving the arrows and the ballistas. They crashed into the wall of shields in front of them. The wall of shields shook a little, but it quickly stabilized its formation. The battle became extremely intense as soon as it started. Sulen took out the wind dragon flag from his storage dimension. In order to win this war, Sulen had taken out this magic item as well. Sulen sneered when he saw more and more beastmen approaching. He then injected his energy into the wind dragon flag. Wind dragon sky spin. Violent wind elements appeared in the sky above the battlefield. A few 100-meter-tall tornadoes quickly appeared on the battlefield. A large number of wind blades spun in the tornadoes. All the beastmen, gnolls, and other monsters that got close to the tornadoes were instantly shredded by the wind blades. 8 tornadoes appeared where the beastmen army was the most concentrated. They swept away all the beastmen like the autumn wind sweeping away fallen leaves. Chapter 201. The tornadoes continued to wreak havoc. Every second, an orc would be sucked into them and sliced to pieces by the wind blades. The formation of the orc army was shaken. None of the orcs could resist the 8 tornadoes. Some of the nearby orcs were even lifted up to 100 meters into the air before being thrown back down. Even if the orcs had strong bodies, they were still smashed into a pile of minced meat at such a high altitude. The orc chieftain's eyes almost popped out of their sockets when he saw the tornadoes wreaking havoc among the orc army. However, there was nothing he could do. Even though the shamans were quite strong, they had no way to defend against such large-scale spells. A strong gust of wind blew across the army of beastmen. The army of beastmen that had been charging forward ferociously suddenly fell into chaos. The gnolls, earth goblins, and earth goblins among the army of beastmen had completely lost their minds. Even the beastmen were panicking helplessly when they saw the rain of arrows from the longbowmen of Northtown City. The pressure on the spear formation was greatly reduced. Under Sullen's command, the orcs pushed forward with their shields. They would thrust forward with every step they took. Every step they took would leave a large number of orcs injured or killed. The orc army's formation was in complete disarray under the effect of the tornado dragon. The orc army had no choice but to back off. The orc chieftain's formation was densely packed. The warriors were using the range of their spears to suppress the orcs. The tall tower shields kept the orcs' attacks at bay. The orcs were used to fighting in a disorganized formation. However, their individual strength was completely useless against the orc chieftain's formation. Their disorganized formation meant they would have to face 2 or more spears at the same time. The orcs had no advantage against the orcs in a battle like this. Even though they had the advantage of their physique, the production level of this era was not high enough for them to equip themselves with high-quality armor. This meant that when they were only wearing leather armor, the advantage of their physique would be greatly suppressed when facing the sharp spears of the Northgard city's infantry. The fact that the orc army did not fall apart while facing the tornado was already impressive. Sulan did not get carried away and asked the soldiers of the northern fortress city to launch a counterattack. Once they launched a counterattack, the infantry formation would scatter. It would be fine if the orc army fell apart and ran away, but if the orc army regrouped and launched a counterattack, the soldiers of the northern fortress city would lose their advantage. Although the orc army's vanguard had collapsed, the orc chieftain was still there. Although the middle of the orc army was hit by the tornado, they still managed to maintain their formation. The soldiers of Northern Town City drove the orc vanguard forward, wanting them to charge into the enemy formation. The wind dragon's heavenly spiral wreaked havoc. The gnolls, earth spirit bears, and goblins that served as auxiliary troops had completely collapsed. The remaining orcs also lost the courage to resist and scattered in all directions. For a moment, the entire battlefield was filled with scattered orc soldiers. Faced with this situation, the orc chieftain made a prompt decision. He ordered the orc soldiers to kill the scattered orcs that were charging into the formation. After the wind dragon's heavenly spiral wreaked havoc for a while, it finally ran out of energy and slowly dissipated. The orc chieftain let out a sigh of relief when he saw this. If the wind dragon's heavenly spiral continued to wreak havoc, there would be no point in fighting this battle. Although the wind dragon's heavenly spiral did not last for long, only around 10 minutes, the spell had killed at least a few thousand orcs. The number of orcs that were injured was uncountable. The northern fortress city's army kept pushing forward. Large numbers of scattered orcs were being driven away by the northern fortress city's army. The longbowmen had stopped shooting. They were recovering their strength. The shaman sorcerer's face turned serious when he saw the orc army crumbling on the battlefield. He quickly cast another spell. The awkward voice sounded again. A wild energy began to spread. The scattered orc army was shrouded by the energy. Their muscles began to swell, and their fangs protruded from their mouths. Their eyes were bloodshot. Mass bloodlust frenzy. Bloodlust frenzy was a deadly spell on the battlefield. It would unleash the potential of the target and awaken the bestial nature hidden deep in their consciousness. It was the same as a berserker's berserk. The battlefield was huge. The orc shaman sorcerer had to cast mass bloodlust frenzy together to barely cover the entire orc army. Under the effect of bloodthirsty berserk, the orcs who had already lost their courage stopped running away. Berserk reduced their rationality to the lowest level. Their bestial instincts took over their consciousness. A powerful force emerged from their bodies, making their hearts swell even more. Their sense of pain was reduced to the lowest level. Roar. An angry roar ignited the murderous intent in the orcs' hearts. Including the gnolls, goblins, and bugbears, all the orcs had forgotten their fear. They roared and charged at the northern fortress city's infantry again. Stop! Shields! Defensive formation! Sullen's face changed when he sensed the berserk aura. He immediately ordered the infantry to stop. The well-trained infantry immediately stopped moving forward. Tall tower shields slammed into the ground. Sharp spears were raised. Against the orcs' counterattack, the northern fortress city's infantry immediately completed their defense. Archers. 30 meters in front, fire at once. The archers following closely behind the spear formation immediately began to fire in unison. A rain of arrows rose from the infantry formation and fell towards the orcs. The berserk beastmen didn't even try to dodge the arrows. They braved the rain of arrows and charged towards the infantry formation. Blood and flesh flew everywhere. These beastmen had become fearless. These monsters that had no sense of reason and no sense of pain madly charged towards the infantry formation. For a moment, the pressure on the front line of the infantry formation increased greatly. Bursting fireball. Painful lash. Summon demon. Chain lightning. Seeing this, Chris Hathaway ordered Karina to cast spells at the orc army. Huge flames rose from the orc army and burned the surrounding orcs into charcoal. A blood-red dimensional door opened. A tall Vrock rushed out, followed by 4 flaming demons. As soon as they appeared in the orc army, the demons began to kill in excitement. The berserk orcs did not show any weakness. They roared and charged forward. Elemental energy surged. In an instant, a large number of orcs were killed by magic. However, even more orcs charged forward fearlessly. The Vrock started a massacre in the orc army. However, in just a few minutes, it was overwhelmed by the orc army. The 4 flaming demons had already self-detonated. However, although a few demons died, they also helped Northern Fortress City hold back a large number of orcs. The Northern Fortress City's army also stubbornly held on with the help of the spellcasters. Although they suffered heavy casualties, the Northern Fortress City's soldiers still formed an iron wall. The orcs' Mount Wolf Riders also joined the battle. These Mount Wolf Riders had more powerful charging power, and they didn't care about casualties at all as they charged to their deaths. Seeing this situation, Sulen picked up the Wind Dragon flag again. The Wind Dragon spiral was still on cooldown, so Sulen directly summoned a tornado. 2 tornadoes appeared on the battlefield once again. The fierce wind swept up a cloud of dust and covered the sky. This time, Sulen didn't control the tornadoes to cause great damage. Instead, he raised a cloud of dust. In an instant, the world was covered in dust and sand. The orc army was instantly shrouded in dust. Many orcs were suddenly blown into their eyes by the wind and involuntarily closed their eyes. The momentum of their charge was instantly interrupted. Many orcs were blinded by the wind and sand, unable to distinguish their direction. The thick smell of blood spread with the wind and sand. The nauseating smell was swept up. Piles of corpses covered the battlefield. In an instant, this place looked like hell on earth. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the Northern Fortress City's defensive army suddenly activated. The second row of soldiers immediately rushed forward and stabbed the orc soldiers blinded by the wind to death with their sharp spears. These orc soldiers couldn't resist at all. With a single charge, the orc army's counterattack was instantly interrupted. The formation was stabilized once again. The 2 tornadoes had a limited range after all. More orcs rushed forward with bloodshot eyes. Even though they suffered heavy casualties, the orcs didn't retreat. There had to be a winner in this war. Either victory or death. In the eyes of the orc commander, Northern Fortress City would be able to catch a breather after this war. If they couldn't take Northern Fortress City after such heavy casualties, their Fireblade tribe might not have another chance next time. After all, the humans had only been in this wasteland for a year. It only took a year for Northern Battlefront City to develop to such an extent. If the Beastmen still looked down on the humans before the war, they were now terrified of them. In such a short period of time, they were able to hold off the orc army with less than a fifth of their orcs' numbers, causing such a large number of casualties. If the orcs attacked again, they might not be able to withstand such a large number of casualties. With Northern Fortress City's development speed, if they couldn't defeat Northern Fortress City in one go, everything would be meaningless. The next time the orcs attacked, the Northern Fortress City would take the initiative to attack the orc tribe. Sulan looked at the strategic map. The Centaur army had finally circled behind the orcs. The Centaurs had gathered all their youths and began to charge from behind the orc army. The Centaurs, who had suffered heavy casualties, began to take revenge on their enemies. The heavy hoofbeats were like muffled thunder. The Centaurs quickly crossed the distance of 10 kilometers. There were 3,000 Centaurs, and many of them were females. The Centaurs didn't give the orcs any chance to retaliate. The orcs who had fallen into a bloodthirsty frenzy had lost all rationality. Even the orc commander couldn't command them to turn around and attack the Centaurs. A group of Centaur warriors wielding spears, two-handed axes, and longbows rushed over like a flood. Their attack was like the last straw that broke the camel's back, destroying the beastman's resistance like crushing dry weeds. Chapter 202. The Centaur warriors that suddenly appeared tore through the orc army's defense line with ease. The orc soldiers were already exhausted from fighting the Northern Fortress City's soldiers, and they did not expect the Centaur warriors to attack them from behind. The bloodthirsty frenzy from before had used up a lot of their stamina. Even with their powerful physique, the orcs still felt tired. Facing these Centaur warriors, who were no weaker than them, they were defeated like a landslide. The orcs might be tough, but they were not fearless of death. The sudden attack of the Centaurs had completely shattered their will to continue fighting. With no hope of victory in sight, the morale of the orc army dropped to the lowest point. The morale of the orc soldiers had also collapsed. The Centaurs did not all charge forward. The ones at the front were all tall and muscular Centaur warriors in metal armor. There were not many of them, only around 200 in total. Following behind them were 400 Centaur warriors in metal scale armor, and at the very back were Centaur warriors in leather armor. Another group of Centaur warriors was roaming not far away, firing arrows to help the charging Centaurs take care of any threats. The orc army was utterly defeated. The soldiers of Northgard City also began their counterattack. The impatient barbarian warriors swung their giant axes and charged forward. Berserk. Charge. Whirlwind slash. The orcs, who had lost all will to resist, were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Wherever the barbarian warriors went, all the enemies were cut down. The barbarians' charge caused the orcs' already disorganized formation to become even more chaotic. The soldiers of Northgard City behind the barbarians were able to harvest the orcs more easily. Orc chieftain Gottenron's face was ashen. He never thought that the situation would deteriorate to such an extent. A mere 2,000-strong human army actually blocked the attack of his 10,000-strong orc army in a head-on battle. There were actually several powerful spellcasters in this newly developed territory. Weren't the nobles of the newly developed territories all from the side branches that weren't valued? The nobles of the side branches that weren't valued were able to recruit so many powerful spellcasters. Disregarding everything else, the wizard who cast the Wind Dragon Whirlwind on the battlefield was definitely close to or had already reached the legendary realm. With such power, which one of the human kingdoms wasn't a noble? Why would they need to spend so much effort to come to such a remote place to start their own business? How much did it cost to hire a legendary-level spellcaster? That was an astronomical figure. In the human kingdoms, legendary magi were all famous masters of their own regions. In the end, a suspected legendary spellcaster had suddenly appeared on the battlefield, and with a battlefield spell, the orc army that had the upper hand almost collapsed. If the shaman wizards had not used bloodthirsty berserk, the orc army would have collapsed long ago. However, the orc army had reached its limit, and just as they had stabilized their position, the centaurs suddenly appeared from behind. Fighting on two fronts was a taboo in the first place, not to mention that the orc army had been ambushed by the cavalry. They did not even have a decent defensive line. Being attacked from the front and the back directly caused the orc army to collapse completely. What Gottenron Fireblade did not know was that the one who cast the spell was not a legendary wizard, but Sulen with the help of a magic tool. There wasn't a single legendary level spell caster in the northern provinces, but there were a few legendary level warriors. After all, wizards were precious. Even though there were 2 grand wizard level spell casters in northern Battlefront City, it was still very difficult for them to cross that hurdle. Just by looking at their long experience bars, one could tell how difficult it was to level up. The threshold of becoming a legendary level spell caster stopped more than 90% of the spell casters. The one in northern Battlefront City who was most likely to become a legendary level spell caster was Hathaway. No matter if it was Karina or Grace, they were still lacking. The orc army began to collapse. Up until now, more than 5,000 orcs had died in the battle, including many gnolls, bugbears, and goblins. There were also countless injured. Moreover, with the constant pursuit of the centaurs and the soldiers of northern Battlefront City, the number of casualties was increasing. Now, the only orc army that had not collapsed was the orc chieftain led by the orc chieftain. Sulen looked at the only orc army that had not collapsed, where the orc chieftain was. Sulen did not plan to let the orc chieftain leave alive. It didn't matter if some ordinary orcs escaped, but the orc chieftain and the orc shaman could not be let go. Without the orc chieftain and the shaman, even if there were many orcs left, they could only struggle at death's door. However, if the orc chieftain and the orc shaman escaped, it would not take long for them to raise a new orc chieftain. Sulen did not want to give them another chance to rise again. With a casual swing of his halberd, Suren beheaded an orc warrior who was still resisting. Scarlet blood spurted out, and with another swing of his halberd, he sent another orc warrior flying. Suren then led the Lord's Guard to charge towards the orc chief. The orc chieftain's strength was not to be underestimated. Other than Suren himself, no one else was his match. The centaurs intentionally avoided the orc chieftain's location. After all, their chieftain had already died in the night of the battle. If it wasn't for the centaur chieftain holding back the orc chieftain and the other orc warriors, the centaurs wouldn't have been able to escape with more than 3,000 people. Barbarian guards, charge with me. Suluan roared as he took the lead and charged towards the orc chieftain's position. The dozen barbarian warriors behind him roared as they followed closely behind. With Suluan as the arrowhead and the barbarian warriors as the flanks, they formed a simple arrow formation. They pierced through the chaotic orc formation and rushed straight ahead. All the orcs in front of Suluan were either stabbed to death or sent flying. The two sides were closing in on each other at a very fast speed. The orc chieftain Gottenron, who was gathering the orc army to retreat, naturally saw Sulen approaching rapidly. However, he did not avoid him. Instead, he took the initiative to meet him. Initially, Gottenron had accepted his defeat and was ready to escape the battlefield. In a situation where the army was completely defeated, even a legendary warrior like him would not be of much help. However, Sulen's initiative to attack gave him hope of victory once again. As long as the orc chieftain was killed, there would still be hope for the orcs to turn the tables. Gottenron, who had lost, naturally did not know that this was the result of Sulen's special preparation. If Sulen did not fight, Gottenron would definitely lead a group of orcs to retreat. That was not what Sulen wanted to see. Berserk. Seeing the orc chieftain and the orc warriors who took the initiative to meet him, the barbarian guards immediately went into a berserk state. Their eyes were instantly filled with blood, and the muscles on their arms expanded like balloons. The hideous green veins were exposed like earthworms. Their chests were like bellows as they exhaled rapidly. Blood rushed through their bodies, and a violent force spread throughout their bodies. Bang! The sound of metal clashing rang out, followed by the ear-piercing sound of sharp blades cutting through flesh and bones. The orc warriors beside the orc chieftain also did not participate in the battle. They were all full of energy, but in the face of the barbarians in a berserk state, these orc warriors were still no match. As soon as they came into contact, a few of them were cut in half along with their weapons. As soon as the barbarian warrior killed an orc, the orc behind him chopped at his body with a giant axe. Although the orc's weapon was not good, the powerful force still left a deep mark on the barbarian warrior's armor. Fortunately, the armor that Su Len had prepared for the barbarian warrior was of the best quality, so it was not cut open. Only a deep axe mark was left. The powerful impact made the barbarian warrior frown, but he did not hesitate in his movements. With a twirl of his two-handed axe, a cold light flashed, and a hideous head flew out. Su Len swept his halberd, and the powerful force directly sent the orc warrior who had rushed up flying. Then, he rushed towards the unusually tall orc. When Gottenron saw Su Len rushing towards him, he was not afraid at all. He also rushed up with a roar. He swung the heavy two-handed axe with one hand as if it was weightless. At the same time, he swung a machete with the other hand, directly blocking all of Sullen's dodging space. No matter which angle he dodged from, Su Len had to choose between the giant axe and the machete. Never underestimate any legendary profession, even the warriors who were called boorish by other legendary professions. Any warrior who grew from a low level to a legendary profession would have experienced countless battles. The talents and various combat skills they had mastered were definitely terrifying. Disregarding any spell-like abilities, just by relying on their own attributes, talents, and combat skills, any legendary warrior could be called a master. Earth-splitting slash. Gottenron's heavy two-handed axe carried a biting cold blade as it viciously chopped towards Sullen's head. The machete attacked from the other side at a tricky angle. The two different weapons in his hands cooperated very well. Clang! There was a loud sound of metal clashing. Sullen's purple dragon halberd blocked the two-handed axe directly. Then, he twisted his body and dodged the machete behind him. In the next second, Su Len moved his feet. The purple dragon halberd in his hand directly bounced the two-handed axe away. The blade of the halberd drew a beautiful arc and pierced towards the opponent's chest. The previous head-on collision let Su Len know that the orc chief's strength was not as strong as his. The more ferocious the attack, the greater the rebound force. Su Len used the rebound force to directly raise the orc chief's weapon and then stab towards the orc chief's chest. Gottenron barely managed to avoid the vital parts. A sharp pain came from his chest. Roll and dodge. Gottenron let out a crazy roar. The machete instantly swept over. Compared to the giant axe, the machete's speed was much faster. The sharp blade carried a chilling intent. Su Len tilted his body and rolled to dodge, rolling out of the attack range of the machete. Chapter 203. After dodging the orc chief's attack, Su Len rushed forward again. He did not intend to give the orc chief any chance to catch his breath. Thunder lightning spear. A surge of lightning energy burst out from Sullen's body. Su Len did not activate his territory. The continuous use of powerful spells had severely depleted the energy in his body. Activating his territory would not last long. Sullen's halberd swept across, and the sound of metal colliding rang out. The powerful lightning energy was instantly transmitted to Gottenron's body through the weapon, causing his body to feel slightly numb. After advancing to the legendary rank, there were very few purebred warriors. They were too easy to counter. A wizard could trap him for a few hours with a maze spell. The lightning paralyzed Gottenron's body for a moment. Although it was only for a short moment, in a battle between legendary ranks, such a moment of weakness could be exploited. The purple dragon halberd attacked like a storm, and Gottenron, who was one step too slow, could only parry in a wretched manner. However, with every attack, a bolt of lightning would be transmitted over. Soon, enough lightning had accumulated, and it would explode instantly. Gottenron's body instantly stiffened, and blood gushed out from his mouth. Gottenron's abdomen was sliced open by the purple dragon halberd. The paralysis effect caused by the lightning energy was very difficult for him. Su Len relied on the paralysis effect of the lightning energy to gain the upper hand in close combat. As long as the opponent's resistance did not exceed the limits of the lightning energy, after a long period of accumulation, it would eventually cause paralysis. Damned human. In just a few exchanges, the orc chief had been injured repeatedly. The pain of his wounds had some effect on his body. Sullen's cold gaze was fixed on the orc chief. The orc chief, who was proficient in dual wielding, swept his giant axe horizontally. At the same time, he swung his machete heavily at Sulen. He wanted to tear the damned human in front of him into two halves. Under his furious attack, his might became even stronger. Chaotic dance. The purple dragon halberd left behind afterimages as it constantly clashed with the orc chief's weapon. For a moment, the sounds of explosions were endless. The battle between the two sides became more and more intense. The ground within a radius of more than 10 meters was filled with deep cracks. A biting cold blade swept past Sullen's eyes, leaving gashes on his body. There were no longer any living creatures around the two of them. Everyone who dared to come close had already become corpses. The orc chief was powerful. Although he was injured, Sulen could not take advantage of his fearless fighting style. The lightning on Sullen's purple dragon halberd shone brightly and then exploded in an instant. The powerful lightning energy once again caused the orc chief's body to stiffen for a moment. Seeing this opportunity, Sulen exerted force on his feet and pounced forward like a ghost. After dodging the orc chief's giant axe, Sulen turned around and was already on his right side. The purple dragon halberd in his hand turned into a stream of light and pierced towards the enemy's heart. The orc chief, who had been thwarted time and time again, seemed to have gone mad. He did not dodge at all and swung his machete at Sulen. Looking at his posture, he was completely prepared to die together with Sulen. Encountering such a situation again, Sullen's eyes shone with a cold light. Lightning spear. A spear completely made of lightning appeared in Sullen's hand. Immediately after, the purple dragon halberd swept horizontally and blocked the orc chief's weapon. The lightning spear in his left hand was instantly thrown out. The lightning exploded and the lightning spear instantly hit the orc chief. Gottenron only had time to avoid being hit in his vitals. A bloody hole the size of a bowl appeared on the right side of his chest. The powerful electric current turned the flesh and blood around it into charcoal. Sullen's breathing was a little hurried. Continuous high-intensity bursts of energy had taken a toll on his body. The short burst of energy had caused his body to feel a little empty. However, his current physique was already extraordinary. In just 1 or 2 seconds, Sulen had already adjusted his breathing. Physique not only affected his physical limits but also determined his endurance in battle. His extraordinary physique allowed his body to recover very quickly. The orc chief before him was in a much more miserable state. Several wounds had appeared on his body, especially his chest, which had been hit by the lightning spear. If not for the orc chief's strong physique, he would have died. However, even if he did not die, Gottenron's condition was not good. His lungs were injured, causing his breathing to become more hurried. The damage to his internal organs had caused his physical fitness to plummet. Although a legendary warrior's physique was so strong that he could continue to fight for a few minutes even if his heart was injured, this did not mean that he was invincible. Clearly aware of his current condition, the orc chief did not care about anything else and charged forward to attack. He was obviously prepared to die together with Sulen. However, at this point, Gottenron was no longer Sullen's opponent. Silver Dragon Inversed Scale Spear. The spear danced in the air and a huge dragon shadow appeared. Sulen did not dodge. The silver light filled the sky and instantly pierced through the orc chief's huge body. Immediately after, blood gushed out crazily. Gottenron's huge body stiffened and did not move. After the silver dragon's shadow dissipated, the bloodied body collapsed. With the death of the orc chief, no one in the orc army dared to resist. Everyone began to flee. As there was a river on one side of the battlefield, many orcs who panicked and did not know where to go jumped into the water and swam to the other side. However, the Whitewater River was very deep and there were many undercurrents underwater. Many orcs who were not good at swimming were swept away by the undercurrents. At the same time, a large number of archers also shot at the orcs in the river. For a time, the orcs on the river suffered heavy casualties. More and more orcs began to flee in all directions. However, in terms of speed, they were no match for the centaurs. How could the centaurs, who hated the orcs, let go of this opportunity to beat them while they were down? The 3,000 centaurs split into small groups of dozens and began to chase after the orcs on the battlefield. The army of the northern battlefront city also spread out and began to chase after the orcs. At the same time, some orcs who had no hope of escaping began to surrender. Some of them began to capture captives. However, there were not many captives this time. Only a small number of orcs surrendered. Of course, this was also because the hatred between the orcs and centaurs was too deep. If the orcs surrendered, the centaurs would most likely not accept it. After the orc army fled in all directions, the army of the northern battlefront city stopped chasing. The army of the northern battlefront city was wearing heavy armor. Naturally, they were not fast enough. Hence, the task of chasing after the orcs was left to the centaurs. With the speed of the centaurs, it was difficult for the orcs to escape. After the centaurs chased after the orcs, the soldiers of the northern battlefront city began to clean up the battlefield and save the injured. Sulen also began to cast physique healing on the heavily injured. The number of casualties was quickly calculated. Although the northern battlefront city had defeated the orcs, they had suffered the most casualties ever since they came to the wasteland. More than half of the spearmen were killed. The death toll was more than 300. Among them, 200 of the mercenaries and merchant guards were killed. The northern battlefront city had lost 600 people this time. However, despite the heavy casualties, many of the human soldiers had successfully leveled up in this battle. Many elite spearmen had become heavy-armored spearmen. Some of the heavy-armored spearmen had even become Spear Imperial Guards. The Spear Imperial Guards were the ultimate type of spearmen. However, it did not mean that they were the end of the line. If a Spear Imperial Guard wanted to become a formation breaker, they had to be the best of the best. The success rate was very low. There were more than 2,000 orcs, gnolls, earth goblins, and bugbears in total. About 6,000 to 7,000 of them had died on the battlefield. The rest had already fled. Karina Hathaway and the others ordered the soldiers to clean up the battlefield. Chris ordered the slaves to dig holes and bury the corpses. With so many deaths, if they were not dealt with in time, a plague might break out. At the same time, the bodies of the dead soldiers were cremated. Their ashes were placed in urns and sent to the martyrs' cemetery according to the northern battlefront city's ceremony. Sulen also began to check the rewards of this battle. Congratulations, host. You have successfully defeated the orc army. You have achieved an epic victory. Your name will spread far and wide across the wasteland. Orc Invasion, year 1687 of the Huiyue calendar. Early April. After the orcs defeated the centaurs, they turned their attention to the northern battlefront city. In order to take over the city, they began to wage war against the northern battlefront city. Under your command, the northern battlefront city won this glorious victory. When the orcs were exhausted, the centaurs charged out and defeated the orc army. They even killed the orc Gottenron in this battle. Reputation plus 15. Congratulations, host. You have defeated the orc army. You have received 62,300 experience points. Congratulations, host. You have won the battle. You have defeated the orc army. You have received 2 gold chests. You have received the item reinforcement order. Congratulations, host. You have killed the orc chieftain. You have received 21,200 experience points. You have received a platinum chest. You have received a legendary talent point. Your talents, Iron Bones and Regeneration, have been upgraded. Congratulations, host. Your experience bar is full. Your level has been upgraded. You are now level 24. You have received 1 gold chest. You have received 2 attribute points and 2 skill points. With the constant prompts in his ears, Suluan began to check his harvest this time. He had received 3 gold chests and 1 platinum chest. Sulen opened his inventory and began to check. After 3 flashes of spiritual light, Suluan heard the prompt sound of the system. Congratulations, host. You have received a wisdom leaf. Congratulations, host. You have received soldier training notes. Congratulations, host. You have received a recruitment order. After 3 consecutive system notifications, Su Len began to look at the remaining platinum chest. He then took a deep breath and chose to open it. With a flash of light, Su Len heard the system notification. Congratulations, host. You have received a special soldier's seal, Formation Breaker. Hearing the system notification, Su Len's eyes lit up. The Formation Breaker was a special troop class. It just so happened that there were a few spearmen who had reached the level of the spear guard. Su Len planned to give it a try. If he succeeded, he would earn a lot. If not, he would not lose anything. Chapter 204. After this battle, Su Len's strength increased once again. Similarly, although the northern city armies suffered heavy casualties, they also gained a lot of experience. After this battle, many people were promoted. Although the total number of people was lower, their strength had increased compared to before. Su Luen took out the recruitment order he had just issued and chose to use it directly. Su Luen had found that the recruitment order had a lot to do with his fame or prestige. At first, he only recruited some barbarians, but the last time he used it, he had recruited a tribe of 500 half-elves. He didn't know what kind of people he could recruit this time after defeating the orcs. After using the recruitment order, Su Len took out the book Training Troops. This book was written by Qi Xiaobao of the Ming dynasty in his previous life. He didn't expect to find a military book. There were many famous military books in his previous life, such as Sun Tzu's Art of War, Meng Da's new book, Sun Bin's Art of War, Wei Liaozi, Lu Tao, and so on. However, these military books were more about strategy. These books were good, but there were very few people who could understand and use them flexibly. Moreover, many of the books were written in fog, making it difficult for people to understand them. Training Troops was different. This book was called a military book, but in reality, it was mostly about training troops. There were very few things about strategy. In terms of depth, it couldn't be compared to Sun Tzu's Art of War, which focused on strategy and politics, but it was much more practical. Out of 100 people who studied Sun Tzu's Art of War, there wouldn't be a single person who was successful. However, if one studied training troops, as long as they followed the book's instructions, the soldiers they trained wouldn't be bad. The content of Training Troops was very broad. It covered the selection of soldiers, the organization of troops, flags and drums, weapons and equipment, the training of generals, military etiquette and military law, the organization of chariots and cavalry, as well as the training of soldiers and soldiers. In ancient times, there were very few military books that were so detailed. If one followed this book, they could definitely train an elite army. Training Troops, a book that records the training of soldiers, battle, command, and other military skills in detail. After using Training Speed plus 15, Elite plus 5, Command plus 15, Discipline plus 20. Obtain skill, like Arm Command, Command like an arm. After using it, you can quickly command the army to get into formation and deploy troops. Su Len chose to use it immediately. In the next second, soldier training records turned into a stream of light and merged into Su Len's body. Suddenly, a large amount of training methods and experiences appeared in Su Len's mind. There were even some videos. What surprised him even more was that the videos were all of Qi Xiaobao's training. What better way to learn than to personally experience Qi Xiaobao's training? This military training record really gave him a big surprise. Furthermore, he could access these images at any time. They would only disappear after he had mastered them. Su Len opened the system panel. In the commander column, his commander points had increased from the original 81 to 96. Iron Bone and Regeneration had also been raised to the intermediate level. Middle Steel Bones, after the brutal training, your resistance has been increased. All attacks that deal damage to you will be reduced by 20%, normal weapons are ineffective against you. Intermediate Regeneration, after the cruel training, your bloodline has awakened a magical ability. Your recovery speed has increased. Your recovery speed has increased by 5. Su Len was still preparing to add the 2 free attribute points to his strength. Sullen's strength broke through to 50, but the remaining attribute point indicated that it was not enough and could not be added. After the attribute point reached 50, if he wanted to add another 3 attribute points, he would need to add another 3 attribute points. Seeing this situation, Su Len directly added the remaining attribute point to his spirit. The 2 skill points that he did not learn any new skills were also kept. As for the legendary talent points that he had obtained from killing the orc chieftain, Su Len used them to upgrade his talent, Advanced Battle Reflex. After using it, the original Advanced Battle Reflex became Legendary Battle Reflex. Legendary Battle Reflex. After a long period of hard training, your body's reflexes have become instinctive. After receiving a sudden attack or sneak attack, your body will automatically defend and counterattack. Obtain skill, Reactive Attack. Reactive attack. After receiving an attack, seize the opportunity to counterattack. This counterattack will ignore 50% of the target's defense and attack speed will increase by 50%. Reactive Attack. With this effect, it could be said that he was no longer afraid of sneak attacks. Those who attacked him had a higher chance of being counterattacked by him. With his current attack speed, if he increased it by 50%, how many people could dodge it? After Su Len finished adding the attribute points, he closed the attribute panel and took out the remaining items. There was only the Wisdom Leaf, the Reinforcement Order, and a Special Formation Breaker. Su Len planned to leave the Wisdom Leaf for Hathaway. This item would be more effective for her. The Reinforcement Order could be used to recruit war spirits from the other world. Now that the war was over, he did not need it for the time being. He would use it when he returned to Northern Town. The last item was the Special Formation Breaker. This was the first special troop that Su Len had obtained. The Formation Breaker's Formation Breaker was a Tiger Formation Breaker. It looked very delicate. Formation Breaker. After using it, you can train a special elite troop of the Formation Breaker. They are brave and good at fighting. They are unstoppable. They have the determination to break through enemy lines. Recruitment, 700 people. Recruitment requirements, Spear Guard. Recruitment requires 100 units of food. Kinnar 200. Training success rate is 20%. After seeing the recruitment requirements of the Formation Breaker, Su Len frowned. According to the requirements, if he wanted to gather 700 Formation Breaker, he would need at least 3,500 Spear Guards. Although the Spear Guards were leveled up from the Spear Guards, it was not easy to reach level 5. After going through so many fierce battles, there were only 3 or 4 Spear Guards in the Spear Guards. He now had no more than 400 Spear Guards. If he wanted to form the Formation Breaker, he estimated that he would need to recruit at least 10,000 Spear Guards. But so far, the total population of Northern Town did not even add up to 10,000 people. It would take a long time to form the Formation Breaker. But he was not in a hurry now. After defeating the Orc army, there was no tribe in this area that could be a match for Northern Town. He had enough time to slowly form the Formation Breaker. My lord. Just as Su Len packed up everything, a drow hurried over. Sullen's heart tightened. Did something happen again? He quickly asked, what happened? My lord, we found this when we were cleaning up the battlefield. The drow handed over a gemstone that looked like an amethyst. But compared to the amethyst, this gemstone was more beautiful. There was also a strange power in it. It was like the power of the soul, but also like the divine power of the temple priest. Battle Soul Stone. Seeing this gemstone, Su Len recognized it at a glance. It was a Battle Soul Stone. The Battle Soul Stone was a special kind of soul stone. It was rare and didn't have many uses. The temple would only use it when building the Hall of Valhalla. This Battle Soul Stone could connect to the kingdom of the god they believed in and summon the Valhalla to fight. On Sullen's construction list, there were 2 buildings of wonders that required Battle Soul Stones. One of them was the Triumphal Arch, and the other was the Hall of Valhalla. Su Len didn't have the blueprint for the Hall of Wonders at the moment, but he had already obtained the blueprint for the other building, the Triumphal Arch. The Hall of Valhalla needed to be upgraded to the Cemetery of Heroes first. Only then could he build the Hall of Wonders according to the blueprint. Sulen didn't know the specific properties of the Hall of Valhalla, but from the description, it should be able to summon the dead soldiers of Northern Town and fight as Valhalla. Of course, the Hall of Wonders had more than that. If he wanted to know, he would have to wait until he obtained the blueprint. The battle soul stone in front of him was crystal clear. There were almost no impurities in it, and it was about 10 centimeters in size. This was a high-quality battle soul stone and was very suitable for the Triumphal Arch. With the battle soul stone, the construction of the Triumphal Arch of Wonders needed to be put on the agenda. The Triumphal Arch of Wonders required a large amount of white marble and a master sculptor. The marble needed to be mined in the Sierra de Lotus. There were a few master sculptors in Northern Town City, and Sulen planned to start the preparation work after he went there. He was looking forward to the second Hall of Wonders in his territory. Thump, thump, thump. The sound of hurried hooves sounded. Sulen turned around and saw a group of centaur soldiers galloping over. The one at the front was Mission. This little mare was wearing beautiful chainmail. She held a spear in her hand and a bow at her waist. Her soft hair was tied behind her head with some simple accessories. She looked very valiant. Soon, the group of centaurs arrived before them, and the guards who were standing guard at the periphery stopped them. "Stop. I want to see Sir Sulen." The little mare stopped and said. "Let her come over," Sulen said to the guard. The guard put away his weapon and moved aside. "What do you want?" Sulen smiled at the little mare in front of him. Mihian smiled, and then his face became serious. He saluted Suluan very formally and said, "Thank you, Mr. Suluan, for lending a helping hand to our tribe in times of crisis and helping us complete our revenge. You are the most distinguished guest of our tribe." "Huh, why are you suddenly so formal?" Sulen said with a smile. "Besides, the beast men are also my enemies. This is a cooperation between allies." Mission shook her head and said, "I've seen too many allies stab each other in the back." Sulen smiled and said, "How are the beast men now?" "They all escaped. My people are still chasing after them. I estimate that less than 1,000 of them will survive." Chapter 205. The war is over. I can give you 30% of the loot. Sulen pointed at the weapons and equipment he just picked up from the battlefield. "Sir Sulen, we don't need these things." Mission shook her head. Sulen looked at Mission in confusion. "You don't want them? Then what do you want?" "Food." "Sir Sulen." Mission hesitated and said, "We, the Centaur tribe, want to join the northern city." Ding. The recruitment order is in effect. Sulen heard the system notification. Hearing that the Centaur tribe wanted to join the northern city, Sulen was overjoyed. With more than 3,000 centaurs joining, the northern city's military strength would double. More importantly, these centaurs were the best archers and heavy cavalry. The northern city's lack of cavalry would be made up in an instant. Join the northern city? Sulen held back his excitement and continued to ask, "Now that the orc tribe has been destroyed, you can go back to where you were before. Why do you want to join the northern city?" "Your Excellency Suren, you should also know that the weak are prey to the strong in the wilderness. Our centaur tribe used to have legendary masters, but since my father was killed by the orcs for covering our escape, the centaur tribe no longer has a legendary master. In this wasteland, without the protection of a legendary figure, even the strongest tribe is just an ice fortress. Once the weather warms up, everything will vanish. You are now the only legendary figure in this wasteland. Our centaur tribe can't take any more trouble, so we want to join the northern city and get your protection." Mission looked at Sulen and said seriously, "Mission, I can protect the centaur tribe, but the centaur tribe must be loyal." Suluan pondered for a moment. Although he had already agreed to it in his heart, he still had to put on a good show. Otherwise, if he agreed immediately, wouldn't it seem that he, a legend, was too cheap? Of course, We swear to the gods that we will be loyal to North Town and Sulen, Mission said seriously. Mehian, Northern Town welcomes everyone who is willing to be loyal to him, Sulen said with a smile. Mission looked at Sulen in surprise. His big eyes sparkled beautifully. Suddenly, the filly opened her arms and hugged Sulen. Then she whispered in his ear, "Thank you." Sulen suddenly felt warmth on his face. Then, the little mare let go of her hands and ran away with a smile. Sulen wiped his face. The little mare was quite big. With a chuckle, Sulen began to patrol the campsite in a good mood. I have a little mare that I want to ride every day. If I don't ride her for a day, I'll feel anxious. The North Town city had gained a lot from this battle. Most importantly, the 3,000 centaurs had joined the North Town city. They could recruit around 1,000 centaurs, and they would become the North Town city's mobile troop. Sulen would give the rest of the centaurs a pasture. The centaurs were a nomadic tribe. They wouldn't be used to living in the city, and it would waste their talents. These centaurs were the best herders. Sulen planned to let them breed horses, cows, sheep, and other livestock. The best horses would be the military horses of Northern Town. The rest would be used as goods to trade with the human kingdoms. Cows were raised for animal labor, and sheep were raised for meat and fur. With the addition of the centaurs, Northern Town's livestock breeding would be greatly improved. Apart from the centaur tribe, the spoils of war weren't plentiful. Apart from some simple and crude supplies, there were only beastmen's weapons and equipment. However, most of the beastmen's equipment were leather armor. There were only a few pieces of iron armor, and the quality was also poor. It was too heavy and didn't have enough defense. Naturally, Sulen wasn't satisfied with this kind of armor. So, they were sent back to the forge. As for the beastmen's weapons, due to their limited skills and strong bodies, they used heavy weapons. Most of them were two-handed axes or spiked maces. They were all brought back to the forge. Sulen planned to modify the leather armor into metal scale armor. Although it wasn't as good as metal armor, it was still something good in the wilderness. The beastmen left behind a lot of weapons. They were all sent back to the forge in Northern Town. They would be busy for the next few months. It took a day to clean up the battlefield. It also took a day to burn and bury the corpses. It wasn't until the third day that the Northern Town's army returned with their spoils. After the victory, Sulen had already sent people back to report. Now that the Northern Town's army had returned, the Northern Town held a grand welcoming ceremony. Sulen rode at the front of the army. Behind him were Chris, Hathaway, Karina, and the little mare Mission. Boulder and Johnson led the barbarians and followed closely behind. As soon as they entered the city, beautiful magic fireworks bloomed in the sky. A large number of flowers fell from the sky. A beautiful half-elf girl rushed up and put a wreath on Sulen's head. There were even more half-elf musicians playing music. The whole city was in a sea of joy. Sulen came to the central square amidst the cheers. The square was filled with soldiers and civilians. Sulen announced that the celebration would last for 3 days. After burying the ashes of the fallen soldiers in the martyrs' cemetery, Sulen returned to the Lord's castle. He didn't go to the celebration outside. The refugees and slaves usually worked hard all year round, so the celebration was a chance for them to relax. Sulen wanted to have a good rest. The celebration lasted for 3 days. The Northern Town became a sea of joy. After 3 days, everyone went back to work. The Northern Town city began to accept refugees again. Since almost 4,000 centaurs had joined, the population of the Northern Town city had reached 13,000. However, this also brought a hidden danger. The number of humans was too small. The barbarians, half-elves, drows, and centaurs had almost 5,000 people in total. Although the human population was 8,000, they were still weak compared to these races. The current situation in the Northern Town city was the result of Sulen's personal strength and charisma. Therefore, in order to eliminate the hidden danger, the Northern Town city increased the number of immigrants. The defeated orcs in the wilderness had already spread the news of the Northern Town's power. In the wilderness, no other tribe dared to challenge the northern town. In addition to increasing the number of immigrants, Sulen began to recruit soldiers again. This time, Sulen was going to recruit 2,000 spearmen. The spearmen who had survived several battles were going to be the basic officers. Because Sulen had read the training records, his ability to train soldiers had skyrocketed. The speed at which the army was formed had greatly increased. In order to form the formation breaker camp as soon as possible, Sulen needed a large number of spearmen. After announcing the expansion of the army, Sulen called the 4 soldiers who had already reached the level of spear guard. He planned to let these soldiers try to advance into the formation breaker camp. Unexpectedly, among the 4 spear imperial guards, only one was human. The other 3 were the war spirits that he had summoned before. Among these war spirits, there were still more than a dozen archers. There were less than 10 spearmen. In order to advance into the formation breaker camp, they had to go through a cruel test. Sulen built a training ground outside the northern town according to the test requirements of the formation breaker camp. The soldiers who wanted to advance into the formation breaker camp had to undergo training there. After the training, they would go to the final step. The formation breaker camp was limited to 700 people. This was because there were only 700 light balls in the Tiger Tally. These light balls looked very similar to the self-created general models Sulen had before. However, they were much smaller than the self-created general model. They should be similar items. However, the self-created general model was the complete version. This one was indeed a watered-down version. After the training, if the spear guard successfully merged with the light ball, then he would advance into the formation breaker camp. Of course, if the merging failed, it would not affect him. It could only be said that he was not suitable to become the formation breaker camp. Because there were only 700 light balls, there were only 700 people in the formation breaker camp. Every time a soldier of the formation breaker camp died, the light ball on his body would automatically return to the Tiger Tally. Then, a new soldier of the formation breaker camp would be selected. After letting the 4 spear guards train here, Sulen led the architects of the northern town to begin an environmental survey. He was already preparing to build the Arc de Triomphe. Sulen planned to build the Arc de Triomphe in front of the central town square, on the Avenue of the Rising Sun. From the gate of the northern town square, along the Avenue of the Rising Sun, all the way to the central town square, and then to the city lord's mansion and the harvest altar. All of them were on this central axis. The Arc de Triomphe Sulen planned to build was a classic 3-arched building. The whole body was carved with pure white marble. The major battles that Sulen had experienced would be carved on it. Sulen had already drawn the rough design of the Arc de Triomphe. Of course, the real blueprint still needed to be supplemented by the master architects. The final blueprint would only be officially built after Sulen approved it. The entire Arc de Triomphe needed a few hundred tons of marble to build. Fortunately, there were more than a dozen camel beasts in the territory. These large and powerful camel beasts could carry several tons of stone at a time. If they relied only on manpower, just transporting the marble from the Sierra de Lotus would be a big problem. In order to mine the marble, Sulen specially allocated a group of 500 kobold miners. Then, he arranged for 2 groups of soldiers to go to the Sierra de Lotus to mine the marble. The construction of the northern town square was also in progress. Because of the growth of the population, 70% of the land outside the town was used for planting sugar beets and potatoes. The rest of the land was used for planting barley, oats, and other brewing materials. Some of the land was used for planting spices. Buying spices from the caravans was too expensive. Sulen planned to grow some spices. Not only could he use them himself, but he could also make money. However, Sulen felt that it was a pity that there were too few types of spices suitable for growing in the north. P.S. The following does not count. Thanks to Big Apple, Big Orange, Master Pooh, Long Jody, Speaking Loneliness to Loneliness, Iron Blood Ho, Chow 534, Kitten Loves Fishing H, Big Devil V, Spicy Peppermint, Let Him, Fragrant Lemon Tea, There's Actually a Master, Goodbye to You, Master of the Heavenly Court, Mysterious Mr. X, A Share of Sunshine, Meng Xintian, and other book friends tips. Thank you to 133,955 for your 2,000 Chidian coins tip. Thank you to Rotsun for your 2,000 Chidian coins tip. Thank you to Don't Be a Moralist. Thank you to Warm Wine, Desert Bandits for your 1,000 Chidian coins tip. Thank you to 20200831205259011 for your 1,334 Chidian coins tip. Thank you to 1607101921111128 for your 2,000 Chidian coins tip. Thank you to Tomorrow Night Doesn't Accept Books, Nuaing, White Cloud Leisure. Thank you to 2017010092002641356 for your 500 Chidian coins tip. Floating Dream thanks. Chapter 206. After confirming the location and shape of the Arc de Triomphe, the construction of the Arc de Triomphe began. Other than checking on the progress every day, Su Len went to the training grounds of the formation breaker outside the city. After a week of training, the spear guards were ready to try to fuse with the ball of light of the formation breaker. The 4 spear guards were sitting cross-legged in a quiet room. Su Len took out the ball of light from the tiger tally and chose to fuse with it. After the fusion began, the virtual images of the 4 spear guards appeared in front of his eyes. There was a progress bar above their heads, showing that they were in the process of fusion. Looking at the progress bar, it would take at least an hour for the fusion to complete. Su Len took out a bottle of rum and poured a cup. He drank as he waited for the fusion result. The fusion process did not go well. 10 minutes after it started, one of the spear guard's virtual images showed that the fusion had failed. The ball of light left the guard's body and returned to the tiger tally. Although Su Luen was prepared for this, he was still upset that one of the guards had been eliminated in less than 10 minutes. The fusion continued. The remaining 3 spear guards all lasted for half an hour. Then, 2 of them also showed that the fusion had failed not long after. In the end, only 1 spear guard successfully fused with the ball of light of the formation breaker and became a soldier of the formation breaker. Formation breaker, the number of people at the front is 1,700. After a cruel selection from the elite spear guards, they successfully become soldiers of the formation breaker. They have a stronger body and attack power. The determination to break through the enemy lines, death without life. The soldiers of the formation breaker had many talents, including strength, tenacity, iron bones, agility and other basic talents. There was also an additional talent of the formation breaker, formation breaker. Formation breaker, the determination to break through the enemy lines, death without life. The soldiers of the formation breaker are not affected by morale. Defense increased by 50%, attack increased by 20%. Additional effect, fight to the death. Fight to the death, as long as the commander does not give the order to surrender, the formation breaker will fight to the last soldier. After activating the fight to the death, the soldiers of the formation breaker will have their attack power increased and their defense lowered. After successfully advancing to the formation breaker, Su Len still needed to give them new equipment. According to the requirements of the system, all soldiers of the formation breaker needed to be equipped with full body armor. Their weapons were either spears or swords. They also needed to be equipped with a shield. At the same time, all soldiers of the formation breaker were equipped with crossbows. It could be said that the soldiers of the formation breaker were much better than the soldiers before. Right now there was only 1 capture barracks soldier, and the equipment was easy to deal with. However, once the number of capture barracks increased, these equipment would become a huge expense. Fortunately, the growth of the capture barracks was slow and Su Len had enough time to prepare. After successfully advancing to the formation breaker, Su Len appointed the soldier of the formation breaker as the commander of the spearmen, and the other spear imperial guards as the deputy commanders. Su Len planned to expand the number of spearmen to 3,000. In fact, according to the standards of the Kingdom of Florence, it wasn't difficult to pull up tens of thousands of spearmen. The Kingdom of Florence only needed to send out a spear and train it to become a spearman. The spearmen in Northern Town could be called elites after going through strict training. Florence's spearmen were basically cannon fodder. The North Town city did not have that many people to expend, so the army of the North Town City had no choice but to recruit elite soldiers. After successfully advancing to the formation breaker, Su Len came out of the town alone. He still had a reinforcement order in his hand that had not been used. Su Len was going to wait until the formation breaker finished training before using it. Last time when he used the reinforcement order, he had a guess in his heart. This was why he waited until now. Coming out of Northern Town City, Su Len found an open environment and then took out the reinforcement order to use it. A light flashed, and the reinforcement order disappeared. Then a system prompt sounded in his ear. Ding! The host has used the reinforcement order. A group of soldiers is about to arrive. A space door opened, and then a group of soldiers came out of the space door. The effect was the same as last time when he used the reinforcement order. This time, what appeared in front of him was also a war spirit wearing armor and holding weapons. What made Su Len even more ecstatic was that in addition to the two groups of 40 spearmen and archers, there was also a soldier wearing heavy armor, holding a spear and a shield, with a crossbow and a long sword at his waist. Compared to the soldiers around him, this soldier was clearly stronger by more than one level. Formation breaker. This time we really made a big profit, Su Len said excitedly. Last time when he used the reinforcement order, Su Len only recruited spearmen and archers. At that time, he had the spearman commander's seal and the archer commander's seal that he had obtained later. At that time, he had already guessed. Now that he had obtained the commander's seal of the formation breaker, he had successfully recruited the formation breaker. After using the reinforcement order, he really had recruited a soldier of the formation breaker. After these otherworldly spirits all came out of the space door, they directly lined up. The leading soldier of the formation breaker took a step forward. General, the spearman squad and archer squad have all arrived. Su Len, who already knew the details of these soldiers, nodded, and then brought these soldiers back to Northern Town City. Because of the addition of the centaurs, Su Len had specially set aside an area in Northern Town City for them to live in. At the same time, Su Len had already prepared to build a town 50 li east of Northern Town City. This area had flat terrain and lush water plants. It was very suitable for grazing. Building a city here was specially for the centaurs to graze and live in. The centaur tribe used to live by water plants, but after joining Northern Town City, these centaurs would become semi-nomadic. After the annual harvest in Northern Town City, the leftover stems and leaves would be mixed with some grain and husks to be used as fodder for breeding. The centaur tribe would use the city that they were going to build as the center to carry out nomadic breeding. This semi-nomadic and semi-residential breeding method could raise more livestock, and it could also reduce the mortality rate of the livestock in winter. In the past, the centaur tribe would have large amounts of livestock die every winter because of the cold and lack of food. After changing their nomadic lifestyle, they would graze by water plants during the summer and return to the city after the winter was covered by ice and snow. In the city, there would be a large number of houses with good thermal insulation. At the same time, there would be a large amount of green fodder stored. In this way, not only would the livestock not die, they would even gain weight. Northern Town City was undergoing construction every day, and the soldiers were undergoing strict training. With such a large amount of exercise, they would have to eat some meat every day. It could be said that Northern Town City's food consumption was very high. The previously stored jerky and salted fish had almost been used up. Now that the centaurs had joined, Northern Town City's meat supply would no longer be tight. After the centaurs were supplied with meat, they would also receive large amounts of other living materials. After the centaurs joined Northern Town City, Su Len clearly understood their living standards. They could only make some crude ironware, and their cloth was also inferior sackcloth. When worn, they would prick the skin. They only had salt for seasoning, and food was also very scarce. Even tea leaves were only sold by Fiery Bird in recent years. As for tea leaves, the centaurs were very fond of them. The centaurs, who ate meat all year round, needed tea leaves to relieve grease and aid digestion. Although they now had Northern Town City to provide food, their fondness for tea leaves had never changed. The climate in the north wasn't suitable for tea leaves to grow. The tea leaves of Cult City were also sold from the south. In this era, the nobles liked to add milk and honey to their tea leaves. Now that they had Northern Town City's white sugar, they added white sugar to make tea that was very similar to the milk tea Sulen drank in his previous world. However, it tasted better than the milk tea in his previous world. At least the milk here was very pure. After the centaurs joined Northern Town City, Sulen placed a large number of orders for tea leaves. The price of tea leaves in the Florentine kingdom was considered cheap, but in the northern wastelands, the price would increase by at least 50%. If they were sold to the centaur tribe from before, the price would be doubled. Even so, Northern Town City had to fork out a sum of money to buy tea leaves every month. After the centaurs joined Northern Town City, their quality of life improved by 2 or 3 levels. They didn't have to wear those prickly sackcloth, they didn't have to sleep in the open every day, tea leaves were no longer a luxury, and their food was much more sumptuous. When the centaurs first joined Northern Town City, their loyalty was between 65 and 70. After a week, the centaurs' loyalty had reached 75. Many centaurs' loyalty had even exceeded 80. At their peak, the centaur tribe had close to 10,000 people. After a great battle, they had less than 4,000. Many of the centaurs had died. Now, most of the centaurs were women and children. There were less than 1,000 adult males. Sulen's original plan was to recruit 1,000 centaurs to form a heavy cavalry team and a light cavalry team. This way, all the centaurs' youths would be recruited. Of course, Sulen couldn't do that. After considering the centaur situation, he changed the recruitment to 400. 200 heavy cavalry and 200 light cavalry. Sulen planned to equip the centaurs with full sets of armor. It wasn't the normal armor from before. It was the heavy armor from the Florentine Kingdom's Red Dragon heavy cavalry. 200 sets of heavy armor for the centaurs were not cheap. Each set of armor weighed close to 200 kilograms. 200 sets of armor would cost at least 40,000 kilograms of iron. However, the heavy cavalry's destructive power was shocking. Their charging ability was much stronger than human heavy cavalry. Of course, the centaurs would probably only be ranked in the top 5 when it came to the heavy cavalry with the strongest charging ability. The ground dragon heavy cavalry would be ranked first. Those were the true steel tanks. The ground dragon heavy cavalry was a type of semi-dragon. No other heavy cavalry could compare to the ground dragon heavy cavalry in terms of weight and charging ability. Not to mention, some ground dragons even inherited dragon breath. However, the number of earth dragon heavy cavalry was very small. There were less than 200 of them, but no one dared to underestimate them. Chapter 207. Other than the Drakes, there were also some countries that had formed their own mammoth cavalry. The mammoth cavalry was 4 to 5 meters tall and weighed a dozen tons. They were unstoppable when they charged. There was also the petrifying lizard cavalry formed by the drows. These petrifying lizards were almost as big as the drakes. They also had the ability to petrify. These petrifying lizard cavalry were no less troublesome than the drakes. Of course, this didn't mean that the centaur heavy cavalry was weak. On the contrary, the centaur heavy cavalry was quite strong. Although the centaur heavy cavalry was powerful, there were many factors that restricted them. The most important factor was that the number of centaur heavy cavalry was too small. The centaurs were different. As long as the northern citadel continued to develop, Sulen could easily form a centaur cavalry of a few thousand centaurs. After the centaurs joined the northern citadel, Sulen realized that the centaurs had a lot more ways to evolve. The first was the centaur herdsman, then the centaur recruit, then the centaur ranger, then the centaur elite archer, and finally the centaur marksman. The other advancement path was the centaur guard, the centaur heavy cavalry, and finally the centaur trampler. The appearance of these long-range and close-range cavalry instantly made up for Northern Town City's weakness. From now on, Northern Town City could rely on spearmen and longbowmen to fight head-on, while the centaur archers could circle around the flanks. The centaur heavy cavalry would be able to watch out for any openings in the enemy's defenses. Once they appeared, they would launch a surprise attack to break through the enemy's formation. It would be the deciding factor on the battlefield. Sullen's archers were equipped with iron scale armor with a chain mail inside. They weighed around 30 pounds, which was just right for the centaurs. They were equipped with a scimitar and a centaur longbow. The scimitar was a melee weapon that they used to chase after enemies or when enemies got close to them. Furthermore, they were equipped with iron scale armor and chain mail. These centaurs could also be used as heavy cavalry to charge into a formation. Of course, they would charge into a regular infantry formation. Northtown City had captured more than 2,000 beastmen, gnolls, earth goblins, and earth goblins. The earth goblins, and gnolls were sent to the quarries and mines. Sulen planned to sell the beastmen slaves to the human world since they were quite strong. One had to know that this world advocated force. Basically, there would be buildings such as the Colosseum in every city. Every day, gladiator performances would be held there. However, ordinary gladiator performances could no longer arouse the interest of the audience. Therefore, many gladiator arenas would carry out more thrilling fights. For example, they could hunt some ferocious beasts and give the gladiators some broken weapons so that they could fight those beasts to the death. Or they could capture some other races, such as orcs, trolls, ogres, and other races, and let the gladiators fight with these races. And so on. These cruel and bloody performances are very popular among humans. There were more than 1,000 beastmen captives. If they were allowed to work in the territory, they would be greatly affected if the beastmen rebelled. Therefore, to reduce the pressure, Sulen planned to sell the beastmen captives as slaves. A strong beastman slave could be sold for at least 5 kinnar, and a beastman warrior was even more expensive. Of course, if these beastman slaves could be transported to the southern provinces, the profits would be even higher. Sulen had already divided these beastman slaves into many groups. He couldn't sell them in large quantities. Once someone found out, the price of the beastman slaves would naturally drop. This was something Sulen didn't want to see. Therefore, he planned to sell them in batches. There was no humanity in the gladiator arenas. For those who pursued sensory stimulation, the most bloody and violent performances were especially popular. Cruel battles between beastmen and humans were very popular. Of course, this kind of gladiator show would consume a lot of beastman slaves. The beastman slaves Sulen sold each time would be used up very quickly. After 2 or 3 times, all the beastmen would be sold out. The northern town city kept moving people from other lords' territories. The large number of people coming in slightly relieved the northern town city's manpower shortage. The foundation of the northern town city's Arc of Triumph was finally completed. The Arc of Triumph was made entirely of marble. Sulen specially transferred thousands of people from other places to build it. The construction of the Arc of Triumph was very slow, mainly because of the large number of carvings on the marble. There were a total of 8 carvings of Sulen commanding victories on the Arc of Triumph. For these carvings, Sulen could only endure the slow construction. On the Arc of Triumph, the names of the soldiers who died in each war and the generals who made contributions would be engraved. This was also the honor of the northern town city soldiers. The Arc of Triumph was designed to be 23 meters tall, 44 meters wide, and 22 meters thick. It was a 3-arched building. The Arc of Triumph was built in the Gothic style. There were also some carved angels on the pillars of the arches as decorations. On the left and right sides of the arches, there were also carvings of the soldiers of the northern town city. There were barbarian warriors, elite spearmen, half-elf longbowmen, drow warriors, centaurs, and so on. At the top of the Arc of Triumph, there was also a statue of Sulen riding on a horse. The Arc of Triumph was a very large project. If there wasn't enough manpower, it would be impossible to build it without a year or 2. During the construction, Sulen specially used the stone to mud spell to merge the cracks on the Arc of Triumph so that it looked like a hole. After the beastmen were defeated, the northern town city became the most powerful force in the surrounding wastelands. Sulen's work also became a lot easier. Now, other than the fixed daily training and inspection, his favorite thing was the various delicacies created by the halfling Frodo. Frodo even used some dragon meat and other ingredients from the Lord's castle's warehouse to make magic dishes. Hathaway secretly supported him. Otherwise, why would Frodo take things out of the warehouse? Of course, Sulan had to admit that Frodo's magic dishes tasted very good. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many people coming after hearing about Frodo's new magic dishes. Johnson, isn't it your turn to patrol the mine today? Why are you here? Sulan asked Johnson, who was arm wrestling with Boulder. Boss, I'm done with my patrol. Johnson hurriedly said. Just when he was distracted, Boulder suddenly exerted force and gained the upper hand. Although Johnson reacted quickly, he lost the initiative. Their strength was about the same, so he lost in the end. Huh, I won. You have to give me half of your share today, Boulder said excitedly. Harris, what's wrong with your head? Harrison sat at the bottom of the table with an impatient expression. That restless look on his face was nothing like that of a sheriff. It was a waste of his serious face. Ugh. Harris rubbed his head and carefully avoided the big bump. Today, I helped Floor to collect honey from the Circus Peak, and a mountain bear took a fancy to me. Although I managed to drive the mountain bear away, I was also stung by the Circus Peak several times. Sulan couldn't help but shake his head. Another greedy guy. At the same time, he was also interested in Frodo's feast today. Apart from them, Chris, Hathaway, Karina, Grace, and the Little Mare mission were all here. Is everyone here? Frodo the halfling walked out in a white chef's outfit. The outfit was a little big, and it looked a little funny with Frodo's body. After looking around, Frodo said, "Then, let's officially start the product tasting." Then, Frodo pushed a dining cart in. All the food in the cart was covered with lids. When the food was placed on the table, everyone stared at the delicious food. In the middle was a large piece of pterosaur tenderloin. The pterosaur tenderloin was coated with a layer of honey, and it looked very tempting. Other than the pterosaur tenderloin, there were all kinds of desserts, drinks, and staple foods. A strange aroma filled the air. Not only Sullen's Adam's apple moved, but the others also looked like they were hungry. Frodo the halfling was in high spirits, as if he had entered his home turf. He only shouted after all the food was served. Let's dig in. Sulan picked up the table knife and cut a piece of the honey tenderloin. After Suluan finished the first cut, the rest of the people took action at once. Both sides were fighting for more. Sullen's eyes twitched. This was the performance of his heroes. This kind of secret barbecue. Suluan opened his mouth and took a bite. The barbecued tenderloin had a wonderful change as soon as it entered his mouth. Suluan felt a faint ice crystal erupting in his mouth, and his whole taste buds felt cold. This was the natural characteristic of the ice Quetzalcoatlus meat. After Frodo's cooking, he could clearly feel the texture of the Quetzalcoatlus tenderloin and all kinds of magical and delicious spices. The secret pork tenderloin tasted very good. Everyone was chewing it. Suluan felt the wonderful cold feeling in the barbecue meat. The tenderloin meat was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside, with a variety of spices. The honey juice drink made with purple crystal honey and ice cream tasted very good. The Little Mare, Mission, no longer cared about her image. She took a box of ice cream and ate it. The Little Mare loved all kinds of sweets. There was also a pterosaur tenderloin next to her. Her beautiful face was red, and there was a lot of oil stains on the corner of her mouth. Hathaway controlled the wizard's hand and cut the pterosaur tenderloin into small pieces. She then enjoyed it slowly. Karina and Grace had completely lost their usual demeanor and image. Eden was also hiding in a corner and eating heartily. Sulan lay comfortably on the sofa. The energy in his body slowly merged with his body. Chapter 208. Sullen's body felt warm. These magic dishes made with pterosaur meat and some precious magic ingredients were not only delicious, but also had some special effects. However, because Sullen's physical fitness was too strong, these magic dishes could not strengthen his body again. Although they could not increase his physical fitness, they could let his body recover quickly for a period of time and temporarily increase his magic resistance. Although these magic dishes did not have much effect on Su Len, they were still very effective on others. Hathaway had the best effect. These magic dishes were very effective on people with low physical fitness. As their physical fitness increased, the effect would gradually decrease. This time, the main ingredient was cryopterous meat. It increased Sullen's ice resistance and doubled his physical recovery speed. The ones who ate the most were the two gluttons, Boulder and Johnson. However, magic dishes were not something that could be eaten casually. After seeing these two guys eating until their faces were red and their foreheads were covered in sweat, their whole bodies were like cooked prawns. Sir Su Len, these two can't eat anymore. The halfling Frodo looked at the two and quickly reminded, if they eat too much, their bodies won't be able to bear it. Su Len stepped forward and directly knocked out the two gluttons who were still fighting over the food. Then, he threw them to the other barbarian guards and asked them to send the two guys back. This time, the food made by Frodo was very sufficient. Although the group of people ate and drank, they still did not finish eating. However, everyone was almost full, especially the few female spellcasters. They had small appetites to begin with. Don't waste the rest. Pack it up and take it back. Su Len looked at the people who were full and said. Although the food was not made by him, the ingredients were provided by him. After hearing Sullen's words, the originally lazy people immediately became energetic and began to discuss the distribution of the food. Even Grace, who was always calm, did not give in. She argued until her face was red. However, they soon agreed on the distribution plan. Chris and Hathaway got the most food. The rest of them did not have much difference. Frodo was now the chief gourmet consultant of the northern town. Of course, this was recognized by Su Len. Every month, Su Len would give him some money and various magic ingredients for experiments. At the same time, he would also teach him a few new dishes. This former adventurer had been completely led astray by Su Len. Although Su Len was not a chef in his previous life, as a veteran of the foodie nation, he knew how to eat even if he did not know how to cook. In his previous life, there were 8 major cuisines and other minor cuisines. Although he did not remember all of them, he still knew dozens and hundreds of them. After distributing the food, Su Len left with Chris and Hathaway. After eating a magic dish, it was necessary to exercise. Su Len had eaten a lot, so he felt a little hot. Of course, this was a normal reaction. He was going to take Chris and Hathaway for an after-meal exercise. With a fast recovery buff, Hathaway and Chris were no match for him. However, they also had their own unique skills. For example, Hathaway's use of grease was absolutely superb. The feeling could only be described in one sentence: indulge in the smoothness of silk. As a succubus, Chris's physical fitness was much higher than Hathaway's. Her coordination was also very good. All kinds of rope skills and postures were perfect. Su Len felt that she was better. However, she was still no match for Su Len. In the end, it was Angela and Anna who came to the rescue. It was a quiet night. Since there were no other threats in the wasteland, Su Len began to prepare to build new cities around his territory. According to the current immigration rate, the city would have 50,000 people in a year at most. Other than the refugees from Florence, the city had also accepted a barbarian tribe. As the new ruler of the wasteland, Northern Town City was not as violent as the orcs. There were many barbarians living in Northern Town City, and the nearby barbarian tribes knew about it. On top of that, the living conditions in Northern Town City were quite attractive to the barbarians. The reason why the barbarians did not submit was because they knew the rise of the city would alert the other 2 large tribes in the wasteland. There would be a great battle when the time came. No one had high hopes for the city back then. No one had expected the situation to suddenly change. No one had expected the orcs to be defeated by the city after defeating the Centaur tribe. Then, the remnants of the Centaur tribe directly joined the Northern Citadel. The Northern Citadel became the only overlord in the wilderness. The other tribes naturally knew what to do. However, These tribes weren't as important as those who had fought alongside the northern citadel, so Su Luan didn't treat them well. In other words, if they wanted better treatment, they had to contribute to the city. It was the foundation of the city. After the first barbarian tribe submitted and was accepted, the other barbarian tribes were also moved. There were not many large tribes in the wasteland, but there were countless small tribes with 100 or 200 people. These small tribes were always in a precarious situation. Who knew when they would be destroyed or swallowed by other tribes? In addition to other tribes, there were also some powerful magical beasts in the wilderness, such as the ice Quetzalcoatlus killed by Su Luan. If they were targeted by them, those small tribes would have no power to resist. The number of barbarians in the city had greatly increased after the barbarians submitted. Although these barbarian tribes only had 100 or 200 people, they were still a lot. Soon, the number of barbarians in the city had exceeded 1,000, and the growth did not slow down at all. Su Luan ordered the army to start recruiting barbarians. He was going to use them to form a heavy infantry. Although the barbarians had the disadvantage of being uncontrollable after going berserk, they were still very useful for attacking. The Kingdom of Florence did not want to use the barbarians because of the high cost and high casualty rate. They were expensive consumables. However, the barbarians in the city were not consumables. The existence of the system had increased the barbarians' leveling up speed. They only needed to level up a few times, and they would be able to suppress most armies. If they were equipped with armor and weapons, their casualty rate would be very low. The city could afford it. Chris, how much money do we have left in the treasury? How many resources do we have? Su Luan asked after signing an order. Kinnar has 30,000. We have 110,000 units of food. It is enough for us to eat for a year. We also have 80,000 pounds of iron ingots. After hearing Chris' report, Su Luan said, "Take half of the money and resources. I am going to build a small city in each of the 4 directions of the city. Master, we have a limited number of slaves. It will be very slow to build 4 cities at once." Chris reminded him. "I know. Let's build the cities in the south and east first. The city in the east is for the centaurs. They will send some people. Then, we will go to the wilderness and capture some slaves. We will send some more people over. They need to raise livestock. It doesn't matter if the infrastructure is not good. The housing and livestock pens must be good." Su Luan said with a smile. "Let's move the refugees from the northern provinces to the city in the south next month. At the same time, send out a 500-man army and some slaves to build the city. We will try to build the houses and walls before winter comes. Also, send the newly formed army out for actual combat training. At the same time, capture the slaves." Chris recorded Su Luan's request and assigned it to others to carry out later. "Master, if we capture slaves on a large scale, we will run out of food quickly," Chris said worriedly after doing some calculations. "Don't worry about that. In a month and a half at most, the food in the city will be ripe again. I can't guarantee meat, but we will have enough potatoes. The slaves will be lucky if they have something to eat. Compared to their lives before, I think I am too kind. Come to think of it, what did the kobolds, gnomes, and other monsters in the wasteland eat? Wild vegetables, insects, plant roots, other animals, and other goblins. They were always hungry and hungry. Working for Northern Town City was tiring, but at least they had enough to eat, and no one would kill them for no reason." The construction of the new town quickly began. All kinds of money, resources, and manpower began to be transferred. The first to move were the centaurs. They were looking forward to the construction of the new town. At least with the protection of the city walls, they would have more time to react if they were ambushed again. The construction of the city in the south also started. The new city was about 50 miles south of the city. It was not too far away. If they were ambushed, they could hold on until the city's army came to their rescue. There were 500 soldiers stationed here. Once the city expanded, the size of the army would increase accordingly. After the new city was built, the 3 cities would form a triangle. The area within the triangle would be controlled by the city. Humans used this method to expand their territory when they were exploring the wilderness. The 500-man army escorted 3,000 refugees and even more slaves and resources to the new city in the south. Sulen personally led the team. The new city was built next to a lake. The lake was huge. Sulen took a quick look and found it was a few times bigger than the city. There were plenty of aquatic products in the lake, and the land was fertile. Sulen quickly decided to build the new city next to the lake. Chapter 209. The new city was located on a slope on the north bank of the lake. The view was broad, the land was fertile, and there were water veins underground. On the east side was a forest, which was very suitable for building a new city. The water of the lake was as clear and smooth as a mirror. The blue sky and the scenery on the shore were all reflected in it. The scenery was very beautiful. Sulen named the lake Mirror Lake, and the newly built city was also called Mirror Lake City. Sulen planned Mirror Lake City to be 1 kilometer long, with a population of around 10,000. If the population increased in the future, the city would continue to expand. However, there was no need for such a big city right now. More than 3,000 refugees and even more slaves began to work. First, they built a temporary camp here. The camp used wood and mud to build fences. When the fences were finished, Sulen would cast mud to stone on them. The camp would not be dismantled after the city was built. It would be used as a military base. Northern Battlefront City was very experienced in building a city. After confirming the location of the city, the slaves began to clear the stones and weeds in the area. Some of the higher areas had to be leveled, and the lower areas had to be filled with soil. They also cleared the weeds and trees in the area. Mirror Lake was not small. It was roughly circular, with a diameter of about 3 kilometers. There were many fish living in it. After confirming the safety of the area, the dock and fishing boats would be built immediately. Then, they would arrange for fishermen to fish and provide food for the territory. The next morning, the sun was not yet up, and the lake was very humid. There was a thin layer of fog in the morning. Although it was almost summer, the early morning in the wilderness was still a bit chilly. The birds that woke up early chirped and began to look for food. There were a few drops of dew on the grass. Sulen washed his face with the cool lake water, dispelling the hazy sleepiness. He had gotten used to the soft velvet bed in the castle and the smooth skin of the half-elven maids. He did not sleep well last night. It was easy to go from frugality to extravagance, but it was difficult to go from extravagance to frugality. Breakfast was bacon and stewed potatoes. Although he did not bring the maids, he still brought the chef. The chef's skills had improved a lot under Frodo's tutelage. Although Frodo often complained that these people were as stupid as swine beasts, they were actually very good at cooking. The bacon was beef, mixed with onions, wild vegetables, and mushrooms that were commonly found in the wilderness. The fragrant meat broth emitted an alluring aroma that could awaken one's digestive system. This was the most common method of cooking in Northern Town City. After all, there were so many potatoes here. Sulen took a piece of black bread and heated it up. Then, he tore it into small pieces and threw them into the broth. The fragrant and delicious broth softened the originally dry and hard black bread. After swallowing the soft bread and the hot broth together, a warm feeling enveloped his body. His stomach, which was rumbling with hunger, also felt satisfied. The soft stewed beef was paired with some vegetables, and the taste was not bad. The potatoes were soft and glutinous. With a gentle press of the tongue, it mixed with the fragrant meat broth and was swallowed into the stomach. Black bread was not bad. In fact, it depended on the materials used to make it. Back in Kalen City, most merchants sold black bread with a lot of bran, pebbles, and even wood shavings, so the price was very low. It only cost 2 coppers. This kind of bread was a little soft when fresh out of the oven, but it could be used as a weapon after cooling down. The black bread made in Northern Town City was not like this. There were no wood shavings, pebbles, or other random things in it. The good thing about black bread was that it was easy to store. Northern Town City made a lot of black bread to use as dry rations. After breakfast, Sulen led the soldiers of Northern Town City to patrol around Mirror Lake. The morning breeze blew away the mist, and the soft sunlight shone down. A thin layer of mist surrounded Mirror Lake in the early morning. It was like silk, faintly discernible, reflecting the surrounding scenery. It was like a fairyland. Sulen left 400 soldiers to protect the camp. He personally led 100 people to explore the surrounding environment. Sulen was not familiar with Mirror Lake, but with such an abundant water source, there must be many tribes living nearby. In addition to these tribes, Sulen also wanted to make sure there were no powerful magic beasts living nearby. He needed to clear out the dangers around Mirror Lake City in advance. Not long after, a faint sour smell floated in the air. It smelled like excrement or green bubbling sewage. Sulen frowned. He was very familiar with this smell. Many goblins, kobolds, and gnolls had this smell in their territories. Soon, the scouts at the front came back with news. "Sir, the scouts have reported that they found a kobold tribe of over 1,000 people in the eastern forest," a soldier hurried over to report. Over 1,000 people. Mirror Lake City just happens to be short on manpower. "Bring some people with me to capture these kobolds," Sulen said directly. Half of the 100 soldiers he brought with him were new recruits. Even so, new recruits were enough to deal with monsters like the kobolds. Sulen brought the scouts closer to the kobold tribe. The kobold tribe was located in the forest. These kobolds had gathered a lot of wood and mixed it with mud and hay to build some low shacks. There were pits in the shacks. These half-underground shacks had better insulation. The pits were where they lived. There was some hay and dried branches inside. Some even had a few pieces of dirty fur or black cloth. There were 2 or 3 kobolds in each shack. Sulen frowned as he endured the suffocating smell. Every time he came to the natives' camp, Sulen felt like he was being attacked by a biological weapon. Northern Battlefront City was very experienced in dealing with kobolds. First, the longbowmen would fire 2 rounds of arrows. Then, the barbarians in heavy armor would charge and break through the kobolds' defense line. Then, the spearmen would form a formation and attack. If they were defeated in 1 round, then they would chase and capture slaves. If they were not defeated, then they would attack again. When a large group of people approached, no matter how well they hid, they would still make a lot of noise. At the very least, the birds and insects would alert them. Some kobolds had already noticed the commotion around them. Then, many kobolds picked up their weapons and prepared for battle. "Sir, should we make a move?" A captain came to Sulen's side and asked in a low voice. "Go. Take care of it quickly." After the order was given, the Northern Battlefront City's army began their attack. First, there were 2 waves of arrows. Then, the barbarians charged, followed by the spearmen. The kobold camp, which did not even have a wall, was in chaos. The barbarians charged into the kobold tribe like a gust of wind. The spearmen behind them quickly formed a formation and formed 2 groups of spears. They began to push forward. The soldiers of Northern Battlefront City were a lot stronger than these kobolds. After training in the military camp, they had mastered all kinds of military skills and fighting techniques. After being strengthened by the system, even the new recruits were quite strong. As long as they went on the battlefield a few times and killed some kobolds, goblins, and gnolls, they would quickly level up. Among all the classes in Northern Town, the human spearmen gave the lowest experience points. The other classes, such as archers, barbarian warriors, centaur knights, half-elf longbowmen, and drow warriors, had more experience points than him. Of course, their overall stats were also the lowest. Of course, for the army, besides personal strength, discipline was more important. Pure bravery and violence were not popular in the army. This was also why the barbarians in Northern Battlefront City always formed their own teams. When the barbarians fought, all their formations would be messed up. Although the barbarians were strong, if Sulen really had to choose, he would choose the weaker spear guard. Moreover, the spear guard could also advance into the formation breaker. The formation breaker's strength was no weaker than the barbarian berserkers. Compared to the berserkers, they were more disciplined. After the 700 formation breaker soldiers formed a formation, even if the barbarian berserkers had twice the number of soldiers, they could still win. Over the years, the kingdom of Florence had fought against the barbarians, orcs, and gnolls in the north. They did not rely on individual bravery. In battles with less than 1,000 people, the kingdom of Florence lost more than they won. However, when the number of barbarians reached tens of thousands, the result was basically a huge victory for the humans. The kobolds who had not fully woken up from their dreams were attacked by a rain of arrows. Before they could react, the barbarians rushed up like a meat grinder. The kobolds who had just climbed out of their shacks were immediately slaughtered mercilessly. The charging barbarians and the iron armor on their bodies weighed more than 300 pounds. Coupled with the impact, some kobolds were directly knocked away like ragdolls. Many kobolds' chests were directly broken. Even more kobolds were chopped in half by giant axes. After seeing the northern battlefront city soldiers slaughtering the kobolds like vegetables, the kobolds quickly fled in panic. The soldiers of the northern battlefront city began to capture slaves. After the battle, the number of kobolds who died was at most over 100. Half of the remaining kobolds escaped, and the rest were all captured. In the next 2 days, Sulan led the soldiers of the northern battlefront city to sweep the area around Mirror Lake. In the end, they captured more than 3,000 slaves and came here to reclaim the land. In addition to the slaves from the northern battlefront city and the refugees, there were now more than 10,000 people gathered in Mirror Lake City. The construction of Mirror Lake City began with the city walls. Because there was a lack of stone around Mirror Lake City, they used rammed earth walls. After the brick kiln factory was built, they would wrap the rammed earth walls with a layer of bricks. Mirror Lake City was close to Mirror Lake, so there was an abundance of water. The surrounding land was fertile and very suitable for farming. In the future, large amounts of farmland would be cultivated here. No matter which era it was, food was very important. The construction of Mirror Lake City would take a long time, so Sulan would stay here for a long time. Chapter 210. Northern Garrison City was already very familiar with how to enslave kobolds and goblins. They would select some kobold supervisors and goblin supervisors from these slaves and give them slightly better treatment. These people with vested interests would then help Northern Garrison City oppress the other slaves. Tens of thousands of people worked together on the construction site, and the progress of the project was quite good. Mirror Lake City's walls were built using rammed earth, and the height was only 6 meters. The higher the rammed earth walls were built, the larger the layer of earth below. The amount of work required to build a 10-meter-high wall was more than double that of a 6-meter-high wall. A 6-meter-high wall could already block the vast majority of wasteland monsters. The remaining 6-meter-high walls wouldn't be able to block them. Even if you built a 10-meter-high wall, it still wouldn't be able to block them. Therefore, they built a 6-meter-high wall. Speaking of which, the difficulty of building a rammed earth wall wasn't low. The foundation of the wall was made of rock, and Sulan directly used the mud-to-rock spell to turn the rammed earth foundation into rock. The amount of work required to build a 4-kilometer-long wall foundation wasn't small. Fortunately, it wasn't built in one go. The rammed earth used for the wall wasn't casually dug up. The excavated earth needed to be filtered first, and the stones and other debris inside were picked out before the earth was steamed. This was done to kill the grass seeds, insect eggs, and other things inside. After that, the steamed earth was used to tamp the earth layer by layer. Although the wall made this way couldn't compare to rock, it was still very hard. In Sulan's previous life, he read a historical record about ancient city building. In it, there was a city called Tongwan City. In order to build this city, the walls were built using glutinous rice juice, white silt, sand, and slaked lime mixed with a certain proportion of cooked earth. Moreover, what made people's scalp numb was the strictness of the construction supervisor. During the inspection, the soldiers were to use iron awls to pierce the wall. If they could pierce an inch into the wall, then they would kill the worker who built the wall and fill the wall with their corpses. If they couldn't pierce the wall, then they would kill the soldier. This city became a famous city at that time. Even in his previous life, 1,000 years later, more than half of the ruins of Tong Wan City were still preserved. Of course, this sturdy city did not protect the dynasty. 9 years after Tong Wan City was completed, it was attacked and occupied by other countries. Mirror Lake City's rammed earth walls were naturally not that extravagant. Sulan did not have a large amount of glutinous rice to build a city, but they did transport a batch of lime from Northern Town City. Then, they mixed the lime and steamed earth according to a certain ratio to build the city. While Mirror Lake City was being built, the soldiers weren't idle either. Although Mirror Lake City had been cleaned up, there were still tribes from the surrounding areas that were migrating there. This way, not only could these soldiers be used for training, they could also continue to provide slaves for Mirror Lake City. Sulan didn't go there again except for a few days ago when he took the soldiers to wipe out a few tribes. This level of battle was too easy, and there was no challenge at all. Sulan just left it to the soldiers to deal with. Then he asked the craftsman to make a boat for him and went fishing on Mirror Lake. However, his leisurely life was soon disrupted. "You said that a pack of wolves attacked the slaves of Mirror Lake City?" Sulan handed 2 fish to the guard beside him. "Yes, sir, and it's not the first time." The drow nodded and continued, "At first, we thought it was a few wild wolves or other beasts that attacked the slaves when they were alone, but there have been continuous attacks in the past few days." "Did you find the wolves or beasts that attacked?" Sulan frowned and asked. "Sir, we have sent all the scouts to look for them, but there is no news yet. Send some of the scouts from Northern Town City over and expand the search area. I don't believe that those beasts will suddenly appear and disappear." Sulan said with a cold gaze. "Yes, sir. At the same time, send some more soldiers to the construction site of Mirror Lake City. Tell the workers and slaves not to act alone. If you find anything unusual, report it immediately." Under Sulan's order, Northern Town City quickly sent a group of scouts, led by Aiton. With more scouts, the investigation area was expanded again. However, as soon as the order was given, Mirror Lake City was attacked again. This time, the attack was more serious than any of the previous ones. Not only did some slaves and workers lose their lives, even the soldiers that Sulan sent to protect Mirror Lake City were injured. 4 spearmen from Northern Town City died from the attacks of the beasts. Moreover, the continuous deaths had seriously affected the construction of Mirror Lake City. The situation was very serious. Northern Town City's soldiers had cleared out so many tribes in Mirror Lake City without any deaths, but they were killed by some beasts. Sulan's face was as cold as ice. At first, Sulan thought it was just some normal beasts attacking, but now, even 4 of Northern Town City's soldiers had died. After Northern Town City defeated the orcs, there were still people or other species that dared to attack Northern Town City in this wasteland. They were challenging Northern Town City's bottom line. Sulan was ready to give these people the harshest blow. The construction of Mirror Lake City couldn't be stopped, so Sulan sent some barbarian warriors and heavy armored spearmen to guard the city. These barbarian warriors and heavy armored spearmen were much stronger than normal soldiers. With these soldiers guarding the city, the attacks finally stopped. The attacking beasts seemed to have sensed the strength of these barbarian warriors, so they didn't continue their sneak attack. The barbarian Great Axe Berserkers who had reached the 3rd grade were very powerful. These barbarian warriors who had grown up through cruel and bloody battles were all elites among elites. Although they liked to go berserk and not listen to commands, they still had a strong sense of danger. With the danger sense, talent, although the barbarians would charge every time they went berserk, in reality, there weren't many attacks that could really damage them. On one hand, he sent out barbarian warriors to guard the city. On the other hand, he sent more scouts to investigate the surroundings. Construction site of Mirror Lake City. The workers started to get busy again. The fastest part of the city wall was already 3 meters tall. Large amounts of slaves brought up the soil that had been mixed and then tamped it down bit by bit. A small official in charge of the construction of this part of the city wall hurried over. "My lord." The person in charge of the construction of the city wall, who was around 30 years old, came over and bowed. Sulen didn't stop. He waved his hand and signaled for them to get up. "Where is the location of the attack?" "Take me there." "Please follow me," the official said respectfully. Near the construction site of the city wall, there was a wooden house. The group quickly walked over. This should be the place where the manager and soldiers rested. Soon, the group arrived at the small room. The bodies of the 4 spearmen were placed to the side. Sulen's face was cold. He walked forward and lifted the white cloth on the bodies, revealing the hideous corpses underneath. The corpses were still intact, but the wounds were hideous. There was a large hole in the iron scale armor, and the neck was badly mutilated. Sharp claws and teeth, like to sneak attack. After looking at the corpses for a while, Sulen said in a deep voice, "Although the iron scale armor's defense is not as good as iron armor, the beast must be very strong to be able to damage it to this extent. Ordinary beasts don't have such strength, and these soldiers didn't even fight back. Obviously, they are very good at disguising and sneak attacks, and they are very fast." The 4 soldiers died suddenly in a short period of time. It's very likely that there was more than one attacker. It seems that we have some magic beasts here. Sulen wasn't too worried about magic beasts. Although they were very powerful and had magic, and were very dangerous, as long as they could be killed, the rewards were also very high. The meat of magic beasts had some magical effects, and the fur of magic beasts was very valuable. There were also some other things. In short, magic beasts could be said to be full of treasures. Many times, humans would organize people to hunt magic beasts. This industry was much more dangerous than being a mercenary. There were many magic beasts in this world. Some magic beasts were bred from generation to generation, and some magic beasts were the result of mutation of ordinary beasts. After mutation, the beasts might become larger in size, or they might have some ability to control elements, or both. Sulen wasn't worried about magic beasts. As long as they dared to appear in front of him, he was confident that he could kill them. As a legendary figure, he had this confidence. After eating a simple meal, Sulen sent out more scouts to investigate. He himself stayed at the construction site and waited quietly. Soon, the scouts brought back some new news. Some wolves were found in the forest northeast of Mirror Lake, but they were just ordinary beasts. Soon, night fell, and all the workers and slaves began to return to the camp. Some of the slaves couldn't live in the camp, so they could only live behind the walls of Mirror Lake City. In the past, they used to take turns to work at night, but after the attack, they stopped working at night. With the presence of the barbarian warriors, the attackers didn't appear. They obviously had a high command, and it wouldn't be easy to catch them. If the barbarian warriors kept guarding here, it was very likely that they wouldn't appear. Sulen didn't want to keep the barbarian warriors here. So he planned to let the barbarian warriors go back, and he would stay here and wait for the attackers to appear. After letting the barbarian warriors leave, Sulen hid behind the city wall and closed his eyes to sleep. Time passed, and the attackers didn't appear. Sulen didn't rest. With his current physical condition, he wouldn't have a problem even if he didn't sleep for a few days. The night grew darker, and the night wind blew, bringing with it a whining sound. Some of the bonfires in the camp were gradually extinguished. It was close to 2 in the morning. This was the time when people were the most sleepy, and also when their defenses were the most lax. Just then, Sulen, whose eyes had been closed, suddenly opened his eyes. A flash of lightning flashed across his eyes. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.